Cardinal Virtues, War of the Submarine, Book 1. Written by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Part 1. Courage. 2. Armistice Station. 20 November, 2037. The only good thing about their current assignment was that Kansas's crew scored some liberty at Armistice Station. Going ashore to an underwater station wasn't that different from being on a submarine, but after 59 days underway, off the boat was off the boat. Lieutenant Commander Alex Coleman, the executive officer of USS Kansas, was no stranger to that need. He was slight but not too short, with short-cropped blonde hair and laughing blue eyes. He was a swimmer, not a weightlifter, and he wore the uniform of the U.S. Navy naturally. He also really needed a beer. Armistice Station was the biggest underwater station in the world, over a mile of stubby habitats perched like giant blue spiders above the floor of the Indian Ocean. It was one of the few stations where a submarine could dock without a transplat, or transportation platform. Most stations had 1 or 2 surface transplats, depending on size. Armistice Station had 7, one of which played host to USS Kansas, a Virginia-class attack submarine. Kansas wasn't important enough to dock at one of the underwater subplats, of course. Those were full of cargo submarines, a recent phenomenon following the rush to the ocean floor. Or tourist boats. So many tourist boats. 15 years earlier, the idea of a tourist submarine was alien. Now the damn things bumbled along like half-blind but friendly manatees, clogging up shallow water and complicating naval operations. The bigger ones ventured out here, pouring millions in revenue into the station. Armistice Station was rich in resources and tourism, boasting the largest aquarium in the world, plus an underwater theater. There was even an amusement park under construction. Hundreds of underwater attractions sucked most of Alex's sailors in like magnets. He wandered for a few hours, peeking into the hangar for Armistice Station's new sub-racers before buying a present for his wife at Fangtooth's. Eventually, he settled in at a bar named Rocco's, people-watching and nursing a beer. Drinking away the salt, XO? Alex looked up and grinned. I didn't think that was possible, Cobb. Probably easier for you than me. Master Chief Chinadu Casey, Kansas's chief of the boat, gestured at the chair across from Alex. Mind if I join you, sir? Seat's free, even if the beer's overpriced. Chuckling, Casey sat down, a bottle of Bud Light in hand. He was a broad but stereotypical Navy Master Chief, with graying brown hair and more tattoos than Alex wanted to count. The most visible one required a waiver from the Bureau of Personnel, a set of thorny roses creeping up his neck. As Cobb, Casey was Kansas's senior enlisted man, while Alex was the boat's second in command. They were close to the same age. Casey beat him by 3 years, and 2 legs of Kansas's command triad. They must have realized you were American, Casey said. That means they charge twice as much. Probably, Alex laughed, leaning back in his chair. Americans weren't particularly popular in the nations bordering the Indian Ocean, but he was past caring. 59 days stuck in a metal tube with 130 of his closest friends wore on the nerves, especially when you were the executive officer and the designated bad guy. This was his last Liberty port with Kansas. The next time the attack submarine pulled in, Alex's relief would meet them. Then he'd be free to go home and spend time with his wife and daughters, to relax and refresh before commanding a boat of his own. His 2-year tour had been long and uneventful, not counting sailors' Liberty antics. The alternative's the boys and girls being stupid, so I guess I'm glad the drinks are $20 a pop. Casey saluted Alex with his beer. You can say that again, Alex sighed. A long-awaited port call made the XO busy afterward. Alex bet on at least 2 Liberty incidents dramatic enough to reach his level, maybe more. Kansas was wound tight. Casey took a swig of his beer. "What'd you think about the terrorist threats to Armistice Station, XO? I just caught a news broadcast, and it seems like there's been a couple more." "I think the next few weeks will be exciting." Alex bit his lip. Saying more out in the open was stupid. Still, he half hoped they could accomplish something worthwhile. Kansas had a great crew, but using an attack submarine as a guard dog for an underwater station was like building a steel wall around your mailbox to secure your junk mail. Naval intelligence was torn between believing the threats to Armistice Station and calling it one giant hoax. A year ago, a bomb scare caused a panicked evacuation of the station, only to find that the bomb consisted of PVC pipe and green Play-Doh. The station's administrative council refused to evacuate again, without hard proof, and Alex couldn't blame them. The last evacuation cost over $100 million. Transporting thousands of people by sea, at short notice, was almost impossible. It wasn't as though people could just walk outside. "Ours is not the reason why, right?" Casey grinned. "Guess we should just be grateful that we get a few days off before..." 2 ringtones cut him off. Alex grimaced. Armistice Station had cell service for locally sold phones, which the Naval Detachment's commander provided to Kansas. But there was no way they'd both get calls from Groton, Connecticut at the same time. "Shit, me and my big mouth," Casey said. Alex ignored him. "XO." "CDO here, sir," the voice on the other end said. "We've received flash traffic concerning a terrorist threat to Armistice Station." Alex froze. So much for enjoying 5 days in port. "I'm on my way to the boat. You called the captain?" "I tried, sir. He's not answering." Lieutenant Sue Grippo sounded tense. She was Kansas's navigator and had the duty. She was one of the boat's 3 department heads immediately below Alex in the sub's hierarchy. Sue was also Kansas's top lieutenant, razor-sharp and damned good at her job. "I've got Cobb with me. I'll have him hunt the captain down." A cold feeling gnawed at Alex's gut. Kansas's commanding officer, Commander Chris Kennedy, took command just 4 days before they got underway. 2 months of working side by side meant Alex should know Kennedy well, but there was still a gap there. Something about Kennedy that said he wanted to stand on the mountaintop alone. Perhaps he'd been too close to Kennedy's predecessor. Commander Rothberg let Alex run the show, but Kennedy gripped power like a miser. He's new. It'll wear off. Alex had seen it before. But what kind of CO didn't answer when the boat called? "Yes, sir," Sue said. Alex took a breath, his heart hammering. So far, this deployment was routine, despite mounting tensions between the United States and many nations bordering the Indian Ocean. But if this message was right... "Start a crew recall," he ordered. Prying sailors out of dozens of bars, museums, and shops would take hours. Better to start now. Sue acknowledged the order, and Alex hung up, glancing at Master Chief Casey. "Looks like we've got a whopper here, sir." Casey put the rest of his beer down unfinished. "Or another false alarm. Senior Chief Sally called me." "Good, then you're up to speed." Alex glanced around, but he picked the bar furthest from their transplant for a reason. There were no Kansas sailors here. "That means you get captain finding duty while I play ringmaster back on the boat." Casey frowned. "Captain forget his phone? Or isn't answering it?" Alex shrugged. He refused to speculate. His job as XO was to support the captain, no matter what. "Doesn't matter. Let's get to work." "Aye, sir. I'll find him." Exchanging a nod, the XO and Cobb headed separate directions. Alex's walk back to Kansas took 20 minutes. Armistice Station was long, and Kansas was moored against the easternmost transplant. Running through the station, even if Alex were a runner, which he wasn't, would get him arrested by the local police. That was a sitrep, situational report, Alex just didn't want to write. Finally, he reached the transplant elevator, only to wait in a line while a bunch of drunks went up to the cruise ship docked across from Kansas. Alex spent 10 minutes watching juvenile twins run rings around their father before reaching the top, cutting right to avoid the tourists and reach Kansas's brow. Kansas, SSN 810, was a Virginia-class submarine and a 460-foot-long Swiss Army knife. A nuclear-powered, fast-attack submarine capable of shooting enemy ships or submarines, spying, deploying SEALs, or shooting Tomahawk land attack missiles. She commissioned just 7 years earlier in 2030. She wasn't as shiny as the brand-new Zero class rolling out of shipyards with indecent haste, but she was a good boat with a good crew. Her black hull contrasted with the sleek but shiny yachts, container ships, and colorful cruise ships on the pier, silhouetting the boat against the setting sun. Alex ran a practiced eye over the submarine, but the lines were secure and watchstanders alert. Sue waited on the quarterdeck, fidgeting. She was short, with black hair and dark eyes complementing her olive skin, but her glasses only slid down her nose like that when she was reading too much. Alex hurried up the brow, pausing to salute the American flag and then the officer of the deck. The boat remained quiet. Everything seemed in order, and the slight vibration under his feet confirmed that Sue ordered the engineers to take the reactor out of standby. Time to put your big boy pants on, Alex. You're the XO, and the show's on. If not, walking away from a $23 beer was a damned waste. What you got, Nav? Sir, I couldn't say it over the phone, but the flash message said we have indications and warnings of a terrorist attack planned within the next 24 to 72 hours. Shit. That was the real deal. How are we looking? All stores loaded and we're ready to go. We just need the crew. And the captain, Alex sighed. The worried look on Sue's face matched the awkward tenseness pinning his shoulders back, but all he could do was shake his head. Master Chief Casey would find Kennedy. Until then, Alex needed to dig up all the information he could about this terrorist threat. 2 hours later, the chief of the boat returned with the captain. By then, Alex had changed into coveralls and plugged into 7th Fleet's intelligence network, inhaling every threat assessment he could find. He met Casey and Kennedy on the quarterdeck, noting the wary way the cob watched Kennedy navigate the brow. Casey met his eyes, jerking his head towards their captain. Fuck. What's going on, XO? Kennedy asked, tripping as he stepped off the brow and brushing off a petty officer's helping hand with a grin. Kennedy rubbed a hand over his mostly bald head. He kept his hair buzzed short, probably to hide how much was lost. What was left of the hair was light brown, almost blonde, and matched his eyes. Christ, he was drunk. Alex was no saint. He liked being drunk and stupid as much as the next sailor. But with the boat tied up to a transplant and potential terrorist threats in the air, that was a giant fucking nope. Flash traffic from 7th Fleet. Alex tried to ignore the aroma of hard liquor wafting off his superior. Holy shit, how can you get that drunk in 4 measly hours? A terrorist group stole a passenger submersible. Intel says they're heading toward Armistice Station. And we got the call? Kennedy's nod was a head bob. Then he squinted. How long ago? 2 hours. Nav couldn't reach you on your cell. Neither could I, but let's not mention that. Alex stuffed his hands in his pockets to stop a rude gesture. Must have broken it. All right, how's the recall going? Alex's lips twitched as he fought back a smile. You're the last one, Captain. Good, good. Kennedy sounded a little soberer, so Alex shoved his judgmental thoughts in a box. What's the message say? We're ordered to get underway to hunt down a waterborne terrorist threat to Armistice Station, Alex replied, jerking his boss up short. What? Really? Kennedy scoffed. Couldn't they send a surface ship for that? Not when intelligence indicates the terrorists have stolen a Nake Offshore 4 submarine, a new voice interjected. Civilian submarines were all the rage. Advances in technology made them cheaper than ever. Nake Submarine, the biggest sub-builder, grew into a Fortune 500 company almost overnight in 2029. Alex turned to see a newcomer walking up the brow. He did a double-take. She wasn't a member of the crew, or even American. What was a French commander doing here? Kennedy gaped. Alex stepped forward, lest his less-than-sober commanding officer make an ass out of all of them. "How can I help you, Commander Camille Dubois?" Her smile was nice enough to make half the crew drool, including their CO. Kennedy's look was a little too appraising, and Alex tried not to grimace. She continued, "I apologize for appearing with little warning. I believe an email from 7th Fleet announcing my presence should arrive shortly." Alex Coleman, XO. He waved her past the officer of the deck and shook her hand. Alex saw Sue searching message traffic on a tablet out of the corner of his eye, her glasses still trying to pop off the end of her nose. "Welcome aboard. May I introduce Commander Chris Kennedy, our captain?" "It is a pleasure, Monsieur le Capitaine." She shook Kennedy's hand with a smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing, and Alex wanted to kick his boss. Kennedy grinned. "The pleasure's mine." Does he have to be such a cheerful drunk? Alex cleared his throat. "Not to be a Debbie Downer." "Debbie Downer?" Dubois cocked her head. "Sorry, just a phrase." Alex's face heated. "Anyway, what I was trying to ask is why you're here." "Ah, of course." Dubois shrugged gracefully. "My government and yours thought it wise to send an expert on the current threat. I am here to brief your crew and to accompany Kansas on the hunt for the terrorists." "I see." Alex glanced at Sue, who nodded. So, Dubois belonged here. Fantabulous. Alex supposed he should be thankful for any help, but why did this short-notice mission grow weirder by the moment? Still, he had a job to do, so he directed Sue to escort Dubois below, and started work to get Kansas underway. Kennedy didn't do much other than stare at Dubois' retreating rear end, a lazy smile on his face while he leaned on the sail. "Let's get you a shower, sir," Master Chief Casey said before Alex could do something he'd regret. Sure, Kennedy was single, and Alex had no business caring about who he ogled, but drooling on your counterpart from another navy was a few degrees south of impolite. Alex threw a thank-you glance Casey's way as the cob ushered the captain down the ladder. Hitting the transplant because Kennedy was too drunk to drive a car, let alone a submarine, would put a cherry on top of an already crappy day. 4 hours later, Alex gathered Kansas's key players in the wardroom for an intelligence briefing. The wardroom was Kansas's officers' mess, library, living room, and basic home away from home. It was a tiny space with 1 table and just 10 seats, paneled in fake wood and blue vinyl. All 15 of Kansas's officers could squeeze in if 5 plastered themselves to the walls, but several officers were always on watch when underway. A flat-screen television perched on the aft wall, or bulkhead in Navy parlance, surrounded by pictures and mementos of Kansas's port visits. That screen made the wardroom the best place for classified briefings like this one. Kennedy, fresh off a nap, shower, and coffee, looked more like his normal self at the head of the table, which meant he was almost as smart as he was arrogant. Casey looked tired, and Sue frazzled. Alex, sitting opposite Kennedy, felt like he'd been kicked in the midsection by a mule. 7th Fleet's intelligence estimates looked bad, and there was nothing about this situation that sat well in his stomach. There were too many questions. Lieutenant Lee Kang, Kansas's weapons officer, sat next to Sue. Their engineer was on watch, Someone always had to be. But Alex invited a handful of chief petty officers and division officers to round the group out. Lieutenant Junior Grade Chris King, their assistant navigator, was sandwiched between Senior Chief Sanelma Sally, their senior sonar operator, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Bianca Souza, the assistant weapons officer. 3 other chiefs rounded out the party. Alex figured they could brief the rest of officers later. For now, he needed their best team in the loop. And now it was time for his favorite activity in the entire fucking world. Public speaking. At least he knew these people, except Dubois. He served with most of them for 2 years, and Alex had their respect. Kennedy was the only Kansas wild card. He was a go-getter, motivated to be the absolute best, even if he was a hard drinker and a flirt. That bothered no one in the Navy. They were sailors. A few warts were expected. Besides, with the U.S. Navy's rapid expansion over the last 6 years, not even the most prudish admiral minded if the captain chased a skirt or two, provided said skirts were into being chased. Oh, joy. Kennedy started tapping his foot. Time to get on with it. Alex cleared his throat. As you all know, our liberty was cut short by an emergency. Intelligence received credible indications and warnings of a pending terrorist attack against Armistice Station. Then, several submarines disappeared from a civilian boatyard in Port Louis this morning. Maybe that explained the French interest. Port Louis, Mauritius, kept strong ties to its former colonizers. He continued, "A terrorist group has claimed responsibility. Furthermore, they've announced their intentions to target an underwater station in the Indian Ocean." Dubois stood. Charte de la Liberté des Océans, or the Ocean Freedom Charter in English, has proven bothersome in this part of the world. They advocate for a repeal of the Underwater Treaty of 2035 and argue that no underwater settlement should be subject to international law. They are believers in, anarchy. Why would they target Armistice Station? Li Kang asked. It's the biggest independent underwater habitat in the world by a factor of 3. More like 5, Sue muttered. Li waved a hand. But why go after a station that no country can claim? That makes no sense. Because that's where the money is. Kennedy rolled his eyes. Armistice Station is rich. Famous people come here. Governments drool at the thought of their revenue. Terrorists want attention. Oui, Dubois smiled. Charte de la Liberté des Océans is a new terrorist group, but they have significant funding. We are uncertain who is providing the money, but the threat is real. And as your captain said, Armistice Station is the most tempting target in the vicinity. Alex chewed his lip. He couldn't argue that Armistice Station was a likely target. It was also only 550 nautical miles away from Port Louis. One other point left him curious, however. When you arrived, you said they stole a Nake Offshore 4, he said. None of the intelligence we received indicates what kind of submarine the terrorists are using. There were multiple types in that boatyard, including 3 versions built by Migaloo, 2 Tritons, and a Nomad 2000. Why a Nake Offshore 4, especially if it's not the military model? Exo's right, Kennedy frowned. The late model Migaloos are much faster than anything Nake builds. Some of them are even faster than we are. Alex saw a few sets of eyes go wide. Kansas was a Block 5 Virginia-class submarine, one of the last in her class. She was a lean and fast attack submarine, capable of a submerged speed of 42 knots. Alex knew a few submarines that could match her, and only the new Zero class was faster. Unless rumors about the new Russian and French subs are true. Not his problem. DRM has a source within the CLO. Dubois grimaced, referring to the French Directorate of Military Intelligence. I am not at liberty to say more, but we are confident that the terrorists are using the Nake Offshore 4. All right. Kennedy sat back, his eyes on Dubois. Carry on. Our sources indicate that the CLO wishes to ram their submarine, which will be full of explosives, into the center of Armistice Station. They hope that secondary explosions from the battery plant will destroy the rest of the station, and our engineers believe this likely to work. Intelligence shows that the CLO took the submarine to an undisclosed location to load the explosives. We are uncertain if they are using TATP or PETN, but either way, the results could be catastrophic. Alex grimaced. His undergrad was in civil engineering, but he liked chemistry. Either triacetone triperoxide or pentraerythritol tetranitrate would do the job. Both were more powerful than TNT and could break an irreparable hole in any underwater station. Hell, either would bust Kansas wide open if they were stupid enough to be in the explosion's path. Why was none of this in the intelligence information provided by 7th Fleet? Still, he listened to the rest, despite the unease building in his gut. Dubois seemed to know her business. Who was he to argue? When she finished, Alex rose. Our mission is simple. Locate and intercept any suspicious submarines in the vicinity of Armistice Station. We are authorized to use whatever force necessary to stop a terrorist attack on the station, up to and including deadly force. Saying those words sent a chill down Alex's spine. Illinois is on her way to assist us, as is a surface action group consisting of 1 cruiser and 2 destroyers, but no one else will arrive for 3 days. The maximum speed of any of the civilian submarines is 60 knots, which means the terrorists could be within range of Armistice Station now. 7th Fleet is coordinating with the locals to make sure we're appraised of expected arrivals. Anyone else will be considered suspicious. Kennedy's eyebrows went up. I'm sure we can trust French intelligence. We'll investigate every contact, but our focus will be searching for a Nake Offshore 4. Alex blinked. Of course, Captain. Anything else? Kennedy looked around the room, but the rest of the assembled officers and chiefs looked as surprised as Alex. Years wore the old NATO bonds threadbare. Everyone knew that the French worked with the Indians to claim as much territory on the bottom of the Indian Ocean as possible. Yes, the US and France had been friends for many years, but you had to live in a cave to avoid the inflammatory political rhetoric flying around these days. No one asked questions. 3. Fumbling in the dark. Sue took the watch in the attack center, known as the Con, to start the hunt. The cramped space was on Kansas's 2nd deck, directly under her sail. Lined with wall-to-wall computer screens and other equipment, control felt cramped with more than a dozen people inside. Facing the bow, Alex ran his eyes over the various watch stations. Sonar, navigation, and the piloting stations were to his left. Fire control, electronic warfare, and special ops, not currently manned, were to the right, with chart stations and additional command and control consoles floating in the middle of the space like sharp-edged electronic islands. Investigate any submarine large enough to carry a significant cargo of explosives. Kennedy crossed his arms, scowling. Significant, sir? Sue asked. Kennedy's frown grew. Alex could see a storm brewing. Had the coffee stopped working already? Kennedy's expression screamed hangover headache, so Alex intervened. Anything displacing over 15 tons, he said. Smaller boats will splat against Armistice Station like bugs on a windshield. That made Sue smile. Aye, sir. Most civilian subs were smaller than 15 tons. Even with the explosion of underwater technology, builders didn't have the money to construct bigger submarines, or the buyers to sell them to. In contrast, Kansas and her sisters displaced 10,000 tons. But they were built to military standards and full of stores, torpedoes, and a nuclear reactor. Not to mention a crew of 135. The Nake offshore submarines displaced between 100 and 300 tons. The Nake Offshore 4 was the newest of the bunch and clocked in at 199. "XO, a moment?" Kennedy asked, gesturing for Alex to follow him aft. Alex shot Sue a reassuring smile before tagging along. Within a few minutes, they were in Kennedy's stateroom behind a closed door. The captain's cabin was the biggest on board, which didn't say much. The single bed folded up into a couch, and there was a tiny table with 2 chairs next to Kennedy's desk. Like everyone else, he stored his uniforms and other personal gears in stand-up lockers, though his, like Alex's, had the dignity of being decorated by fake wood. Everyone else got bare metal. "I appreciate your effort to anticipate any threat, but we need to stay focused here." Kennedy dropped onto the couch like a moody teenager. "Intelligence tells us it's a Nake offshore, so that's what we'll concentrate on." "Sir, 7th Fleet still hasn't confirmed that. I shot the staff intelligence officer an email, but they—" Kennedy cut him off with a raised hand. "They wouldn't have set Commander Dubois with us if they didn't trust her intel." Alex took a deep breath. "I'm not sure that's a safe assumption to make." "XO, this could make us, both of our careers. But we have to be decisive." Kennedy squirmed into a sitting position and kicked his feet up on the nearby chair. He leaned forward. "We can't let these terrorists slip through our fingers. That would ruin us." "That would ruin you," Alex didn't say. "He'd probably survive. Not to mention killing thousands or worse." "Of course. We need to save them." Kennedy waved a hand. It wobbled. "That's obvious. It's our duty." "Agreed. I just don't want our watchstanders looking so hard for Nakes that they let someone else get by." Alex wished his gut would stop heaving. He hesitated. "Intel's been wrong before." "Good point." Kennedy grinned. "Well, either way, it'll be a fruitless search for the first few hours. I'll catch some shut-eye now while you monitor things. Don't wake me up unless we find the Nake." "Aye, sir." Alex checked a sigh. He could reason with Kennedy when he was sober. Unfortunately, sobriety did nothing for Kennedy's perspective. He slept for almost 12 hours while Alex drank too much coffee and tried not to micromanage anyone. By the time their captain showed his face in the wardroom, Alex's head was pounding. Not trusting himself to be polite, he headed over to the sonar corner instead of eating lunch. His stomach a rolling mess of coffee and grease from breakfast. Kansas got underway just before dinner. By the time the intelligence briefings finished and they settled into a patrol pattern, no easy feat protecting a 360-degree bubble around a mile-long station. It was past 2200 hours. Kennedy went down just before midnight and slept until 1100, leaving his XO to mind the store. Alex knew that one of them needed to be awake during a hunt like this, but he never expected his captain to be so inconsiderate that he forced Alex to stay awake for over 24 hours. Alex had done stupider things, but that wasn't the point. "You look beat, XO." Senior Chief Sally smiled wryly. "You look like the truck that ran over me hit you too, Senior." Alex forced a chuckle and ignored the urge to get an 8th, or was it a 7th, cup of coffee. More caffeine meant he wouldn't sleep this side of Christmas. He was on the drunk side of sleeplessness already. Sally shrugged. "You know how it is, sir." "Don't wear yourself out, all right? We're going to need your ears, not to mention your experience with the UVs." Sanelma Sally was a Navy veteran, with 20-plus years in uniform. She was an expert on every sonar system the Navy possessed, including the new underwater unmanned vehicles Kansas and the other Block 5s carried. UUVs, pronounced UVs, had decent sonar capability, but most COs hated using them since they were a copper-plated noisy bitch to launch and recover. "Speaking of which, sir, UV-1 is cranky. I haven't reported it to the OOD yet because it's just a twitch in the controls, but it's something we've got to keep an eye on." Alex nodded and started to open his mouth. "You deployed the UVs?" Kennedy asked from behind him, making Alex spin around. Swimming 3 of them out was the only way we could cover so much real estate, Alex replied. Kennedy pursed his lips. I see. Kansas only had 5 UVs, and the things wandered off and sank if not carefully watched. But Alex felt using 3 was a risk worth taking. I split the area around Armistice Station into 4 sectors, he said. We have the western sector, which is the closest approach from Port Louis, and the UVs... I can see that, XO, thank you. The words might have been polite. They weren't. Was Alex taking this too personally? Maybe he was just tired. Now that you're up, I'm going to catch a bit of sleep, Captain. I'm beat, he said after a moment of tense silence. Go ahead. Hopefully I'll have more luck than you did. Alex didn't have the energy to respond to that little barb. 6 hours later, and feeling vaguely human, Alex hopped in the shower. The captain and XO's cabins shared a small but private bathroom, or head in Navy parlance. It was the best perk attached to his job. Submarines were chronically short on space, and Alex treasured privacy. Most attack submarines weren't built with enough racks for their entire crew, let alone space for luxuries. The 10 most junior sailors even lived in the torpedo room, which meant they pulled all their personal gear and their bunks out of the way if enemy action threatened. But being XO meant his own stateroom, a little bit of quiet. Alex loved his job, but sometimes having a quiet place to himself was nice. It also helped him stay sane. Still, a month from now, Kansas would be in Alex's personal rearview mirror. His promotion to full commander was already approved, and he'd put the rank on tomorrow. One more shore tour, and then command of his own boat. Something he'd dreamed of since... You in there, Alex? Kennedy's voice interrupted his 30 seconds of hot water, and Alex turned it off. Yes, sir, I'll be out in a sec. Grabbing his towel, Alex escaped back to his own stateroom. Rank hath its privileges. The captain got the head when he needed it. Come by when you're done. Kennedy's voice floated after, so Alex did just that, throwing his coveralls on and heading out through the hallway. Once outside his door, he almost ran over Lieutenant Grippo. She flinched, and Alex paused. Everything okay, Sue? Why wouldn't it be, sir? Her smile was strained. You tell me, Nav. Another twitch. This one was mostly a shrug. We found nothing. Captain's a bit testy. Joy. There went the hope of 12 hours of sleep turning Kennedy reasonable. Dare I ask? Sue shrugged. Wepps has the watch, but the captain had me relieve him so he could do a torpedo room inspection. 3 of the new kids didn't stow their gear so well, and the captain didn't like it. You mean he ripped their heads off? Alex wouldn't have said that if Kennedy's door was open, but Kennedy never left his door open. Pretty much, sir. Laid into Wepps pretty good, too. I'll talk to him. Alex managed not to sigh. Talking the captain out of a temper was part of the XO's job. Kennedy had been in this business too long to get pissed about petty things like new sailors not securing their personal items for sea. Worst case, if Kansas went to battle stations, someone would throw their stuff out of the way. Why was he sweating the small shit like this? Sue slumped in relief. Thanks. Alex smiled. Get some sleep, Sue. You look like you need it. Can't, sir. I go back on watch in 2 hours, and I've got spot checks to do. Your spot checks can wait. Catch a nap. No way did Alex want their battle stations officer of the deck wrung out. There was no knowing when or if they'd run into trouble. Sue needed to be sharp when they did. Aye, sir. Bobbing her head, Sue headed aft toward her own stateroom, squeezing past a sailor in the one-person wide passageway. Time to face the ogre. Alex knocked on Kennedy's door. Come in. Alex stepped in and closed the door. Kennedy was at his desk again, but Commander Dubois sat at the small table, smirking. Something new come up, Captain? Alex fought not to let his eyes flick back to Dubois. Oui, Dubois shook herself. Yes, one of our anti-submarine aircraft picked up faint traces of a Nake Offshore 4 moving south from the vicinity of Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia? Alex frowned, shoving his hands into his pockets when no one told him to sit in the empty chair. No terrorist in their right mind would get near a British-American naval station. Diego Garcia used to be the U.S. Navy's backwater, full of heavy lift ships crewed by civilians and not much else. Now, a destroyer squadron was based there, and rumor said a few submarines would call Diego Garcia home soon. Hell, there was talk of home-porting attack subs in Australia. With underwater stations growing like mushrooms under the Indian Ocean, the U.S. Navy needed all the nearby bases it could get. Of course not. Dubois' eyes narrowed. But inexperienced submariners might think being closer to land is safest. Alex chewed his lip for a moment. Okay, I can buy that. Mostly. But why would they be way up there if they're coming from Port Louis? Maybe they unloaded their explosives further away than we thought. Kennedy didn't sound concerned, but Alex's internal alarms blared. None of this made sense. Diego Garcia is twice as far from Port Louis as Armistice Station, he said. The Maldives and India are further still. Why go there when you have the entire coast of Africa and all its outlying islands to choose from? Who knows the mind of a terrorist? Dubois shrugged. Perhaps they were able to bribe someone in the Diego Garcia. It's not just an American base, after all. The British are always unpredictable. Why they're there doesn't matter. Kennedy waved off Alex's argument. If an aircraft caught a whiff of them, we need to move in that direction. The further out from Armistice Station we catch them, the better. They detected a Nake Offshore 4, but is there any indication this is the right submarine? Nake's press releases say they've sold 100 of them, Alex asked. Kennedy glared. Most of them are in the Mediterranean and other inland seas, Dubois replied, folding her hands. DRM is certain that this is the correct submarine. They traced it to Port Louis. How? Alex asked, and then realized how rude the question sounded. Sorry, but most people don't understand that identifying a specific submarine isn't easy unless you already have its sonar signature on file. I thought no one tracked the sub leaving Port Louis. If they had, this would be a lot easier. I am a submariner, Commander, Dubois snapped. I understand the difficulty. Right. My apologies, Alex gulped. Why was Kennedy's smile so smug? Did he enjoy seeing his XO shove his foot down his throat? No apology necessary. We are all, as you Americans say, on the same team. Dubois smiled again, far too pleasantly. Alex forced himself to nod. Then, back to my point, how do we know this is the right boat? Intelligence has confirmed it. Unfortunately, I cannot provide anything more than that. I am sorry, she said. And we'll accept the assessment of French intelligence, Kennedy cut in, shooting Alex a look of death. 7th Fleet said to cooperate, and we will. Alex got the hint. I'll talk to Nav and get a navigation plan drawn up to head north. Good. Kennedy sat up straight, his eyes still locked on Alex. I'm not letting anything get in the way of saving people, XO. You got that? Yes, sir. You think I want Armistice Station to get blown up? He almost asked. But he had work to do. Pissing his captain off further would only get in the way. One 600 nautical mile, 16-hour sprint later, Kansas arrived in the vicinity of where the Nake could be if she drove at her best economical speed towards Armistice Station. 2 hours after their arrival, they detected nothing except sea life and a few merchant ships pounding by on the surface. A pacing and frustrated Kennedy told Alex to take the boat to periscope depth to download the mail, but even that evolution turned boring in a hurry. Now they were back on station, running lines from east to west and hoping to get lucky. Meanwhile, Alex retreated to his stateroom to check his own email, but the response from the staff intelligence officer left him queasy. XO, I'm not sure where the French are getting the information they've provided. None of our sources confirm that the suspect Nake is anywhere near Diego Garcia. In fact, we have no sources providing information on this matter. In the absence of other intelligence, 7th Fleet advises you to work with the French and accept their input with caution. The email went on in bureaucratic ass-covering ease. No one wanted to tell Kansas to shoot at the sub Dubois claimed was the terrorist vessel, but no staff officer with half a brain would tell them not to either. No one wanted to be wrong, not with thousands of lives in the balance. Rubbing hands over his face, Alex contemplated emailing his wife. She was busy, and he didn't want to bother her with the ugly details. Nancy knew all about staff officers being indecisive ass-clowns who left the decisions, and their consequences, up to the idiots on the pointy end. His phone rang. XO. Sir, it's Cobb. You might want to come up to control, Master Chief Casey said. There was yelling in the background. Dog shit on a shingle. Today gets better and better. I'll be right there. A fast walk took Alex to control within 30 seconds. Unfortunately, by the time he ducked through the open hatch, Kennedy was on a roll, and Sue was his target. I told you to sprint and drift. Kennedy flung his hands up, almost smacking a battle lantern. Your nav plan was supposed to let us hear the Nake, not let them walk right by. Sir, the speed Commander Dubois recommended we use for the Nake wasn't their best. Enough! There's no need to make things worse by insulting our allies. Do I have to think of everything here? Kennedy gestured at the navigation plot. Now we have no idea where the terrorists are. Doesn't it feel good to have made a difference? Sue went bright red. Alex stepped forward, arranging his features to be as neutral as possible. What happened, Captain? He asked. Kennedy spun to face him. The nav plan you approved made us lose the Nake. French intelligence indicates they're 200 miles past us. Then I guess we have to chase them. We can still catch up. Alex glanced at the plot and did some quick math. Even if they're moving at 31 knots, we have an 11-knot speed advantage. We'll beat them to Armistice Station by a few hours, assuming that French intelligence was right about when they were in the vicinity of Diego Garcia. It is correct, Dubois sniffed. When had she arrived? Great. Now their passenger had a ringside seat to the family squabbles. Then we'll be fine, provided we head for Armistice Station at flank speed now, Alex said, hiding his frustration in a balled fist. Kennedy glared. I want to see the nav plan within 10 minutes. You'll have it, sir. Alex didn't watch Kennedy storm out with Dubois on his heels. Instead, he headed over to where Sue stood by the periscope display, still red-faced and furious. He approved the nav plan too, she hissed, glaring at the hatch Kennedy exited through. Based on that French commander's recommendation, who said the terrorists wouldn't dare go faster than 20 knots. I know, Sue. Alex patted her shoulder. How can you just let him throw shit like that at you, XO? Commander Rothberg, this isn't the place or the time, he said gently. We've got a nav plan to build and terrorists to stop, okay? Yes, sir. Sue crossed her arms and sighed. We're going to have to sprint like hell to beat them there. I know. That meant Kansas had no chance of detecting the Nake along the way, even with modern sonar. Alex grinned. Unless some miracle happens and you pick the same course they did. Sue laughed. If that happens, I'm insisting we surface so I can get lotto tickets. I'll buy them for you. 13 hours later, Kansas returned to the vicinity of Armistice Station. They'd now wasted more than a day, rushing back and forth with nothing to show for it. Even worse, instead of resting the crew during the transit, Kennedy insisted on running drill after drill. Alex, whose responsibility it was to make Kansas ready for any hypothetical combat situation, tried not to chafe at their repetitiveness. Yes, the last time an American submarine fired a torpedo in anger was in World War II, but there was no reason to exhaust people in the name of readiness. 6 drills later, each an hour long, the crew was ready to drop. Meanwhile, Dubois pored over intelligence, scheduling 4 separate meetings, 2 during Alex's planned sleep periods, to go over the profile of the NAIC 4 and the terrorists' probable courses. Kennedy hung on every word, quizzing watchstanders mercilessly. "We need to find them soon," he said to Alex 2 hours after they returned to Armistice Station. The watch team was busy identifying and tracking the many submarines around the station, but Kennedy pulled Alex out of control to talk. The gleam in his eye made Alex's stomach roll. So did the way Kennedy bounced on his toes. "Illinois and the SAG will be here in 18 hours. Having help will be great." Alex felt like someone had poured a gallon of salt in his eyes. Even coffee couldn't cure the pounding in his skull. One of the UVs crapped out and sank. "We're down to 2 on station unless you want to launch another." "Of course I do. You're not understanding my point, Alex. We need to find them before anyone else gets here." Kennedy leaned forward. We're not going to waste this opportunity to shine." Alex took a breath. "We'll all do our best, sir, but I'm more concerned about keeping the station safe than finding glory." "There's nothing wrong with wanting both." "I didn't say there was," Alex fidgeted. Not getting defensive was hard when Kennedy looked like Alex was trying to steal all his Christmas presents. "I know you're not terribly ambitious and that you abhor attention." Kennedy spoke as if this was a crime. "But the way forward in the Navy today is to make a difference. I intend to wear stars before too many years pass, and this is my one chance to get noticed." He waved his command at C-Ring in Alex's face. "You'll never have one of these if you keep this up." Alex grimaced. Kennedy was right. You only had one shot at command of a submarine. If Kennedy got promoted, his next command would be a squadron or a submarine tender, neither glamorous. An attack sub was his best opportunity to make a name for himself. He was wrong, however, about Alex's lack of ambition. No, Alex didn't want to be an admiral. He didn't know why any sane person dreamed of playing bureaucratic politics with a side of nerve-wracking public speaking. But he wanted command. All he had to do was get through the next month, and then he'd be on track for a boat of his own. But he wouldn't buy one of those shiny gold braggart rings. The Command at Sea pin on the uniform would be more than enough for him. If the Navy wanted him to have some shiny ring to show off, they'd issue him one. "I hope that frown on your face is due to your own lack of ambition, rather than your thoughts on my future career." Kennedy's words made Alex jump. "Something like that, sir." Alex thought fast. "I was just thinking of crew rest. Everyone is exhausted. And it'll all pay off when we find the terrorists. There will be glory enough to go around when we send them to the bottom." A chill raced down Alex's spine. He wasn't immune to the lure of being the boat to stop the CLO. He just didn't want a tired officer of the deck driving their submarine into a seamount before they could find the enemy. Or, worse yet, shooting the wrong submarine. "I suppose there will," he said, and took his leave. Kennedy was too excited to be talked into common sense, so Alex wouldn't try. He'd go around the Glory Hound instead. 4. More good news. 3 hours later, with every sub within a 20 nautical mile bubble identified, Alex felt secure enough to hit his rack. Kennedy was awake, so Alex figured he could get a solid 4 hours of sleep. He needed more, but at least 4 hours would put him on the sober side of lack of sleep drunk. 4 hours took him to 0500 local, too, which translated to 9 in the morning in Japan, the location of 7th Fleet's base. Sure enough, after waking up and taking a shower to wash away the fatigue, another email from Fleet Intelligence awaited him. "French intelligence remains the only source we have on the ground," the staff intelligence officer replied. "Or the only one we think we have, anyway. We have no indication of where the CLO bought or unloaded explosives, However, there is a persistent rumor that they're also trafficking people from India. A British airborne anti-submarine asset detected a Nake Offshore 4 conducting a personnel transfer with a ferry south of the Maldives. They unloaded 9 Indian nationals and no luggage. No traces of explosives. The aircraft could not track the Nake after it submerged due to heavy traffic near Alderman's outpost, but it looks like this might be your target. The Nake pulled into Alderman's and purchased enough food to last a 15-person complement about 2 weeks. Alderman's security scans picked up nothing to note. Alex sighed. Alderman's outpost was a joint Australian-Maldives mining and oil drilling station, not far from India's southernmost tip. A lot of submarines and surface ships transited that area. The Maldives were a short hop away, as well as 2 other major stations. Tracking one small submarine with so many contacts cluttering the picture was challenging for any aircraft, particularly when they couldn't lay down sonobuoys without attracting attention. But why would the terrorists go up there? No way could they unload explosives at the station. Alderman's security was legendary. Unless they hadn't unloaded explosives at all. His phone rang and Alex jumped. XO. Cobb here, sir. We need you in control again. Casey sounded worried, but this time there was no yelling in the background, just the buzz of focused voices. But a Master Chief with over 20 years in the Navy didn't call the XO when he wanted someone to hold his hand, so Alex forwarded the email to Kennedy and rose. I'll be there in a sec. Thanks. Click. Leaving the phone off the hook, Alex hurried to control. Whatever disaster he'd expected wasn't there. Instead, Kennedy stood in the sonar corner looking over Senior Chief Sally's shoulder. I'm dead sure it's a Nake 3, Captain, Sally said as Alex walked in. They've got a compressor on the 62 Hz line that was pulled out for the 4 because it... Nake 3, 4, whatever, it's close enough, Kennedy cut her off. Intelligence could be wrong. The captain spun around. Officer of the deck, query the Nake again. Sue nodded despite the worry in her eyes. Aye, Captain. She lifted the microphone. Unidentified submarine 6 miles east of Armistice Station, in position 22 degrees 49 minutes 30 seconds south, 68 degrees 46 minutes 19 seconds east. This is U.S. Navy submarine. Request you identify yourself and state your intentions immediately. Over. Add that they risk being fired upon if they don't answer, Kennedy ordered. Biting her lip, Sue glanced at Alex for confirmation. This was such a bad idea, but he had no business countermanding the captain, so he nodded. Sue repeated her previous transmission, adding, If you do not identify yourself, you will be declared hostile and fired upon. Over. The temperature in control seemed to drop 10 degrees. Only Dubois and Kennedy exchanged excited glances. Was this for real? Dubois insisted it was a Nake 4. Morning, XO. Kennedy beamed when he spotted Alex, crackling with enthusiasm. Glad to see you've joined us. Good morning, Captain. Alex ignored the subtle barb and headed over to join Master Chief Casey, who stood by the weapons corner, glowering at a wall of displays and control dials, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. Alex leaned in to speak to Casey in an undertone. What's up? The captain's all over this Nake 3, Casey whispered. The computer says it's a 3, and its tonals say it's a 3, but he doesn't want to believe that. Either that or the intelligence he was so hot on 5 minutes ago was wrong. You're worried. Casey barked out a humorless laugh. Shit, sir. I'm all for shooting bad guys, but I'd rather not shoot the wrong ones. Same. Chewing his lower lip, Alex glanced at Sue. Underwater communications were hit and miss. Underwater telephones, called Gertrudes by the U.S. Navy, had advanced significantly in the last 10 years, but a sub still had to be listening. International communications frequencies for surface ships and aircraft got hashed out decades ago, but the various submarines of the world still wouldn't agree how to talk to each other. Don't a few local navies around here have the military variant of the Nake 3? Yep, 4 or 5 of them. Casey jerked his head towards their CO. Try telling him that. I take it you did? Alex knew Casey's original rate was sonar operator, and he figured the Master Chief had been good. Twice. Casey crossed his arms. Not likely they're going to answer if they are. We wouldn't answer them neither. It went without saying that a lot of people in this part of the world didn't want to talk to interfering Americans. American credibility was in the crapper these days, and it didn't help that those smaller nations were now rich enough that they didn't need American protection. Give me that! Kennedy snatched the microphone from Sue. She flinched and stumbled back a step. He struck a pose, his words short and clipped. Unidentified submarine 6 miles east of Armistice Station. Identify yourself immediately or be fired upon. Alex's jaw dropped. Captain, whatever it is, it can wait, XO. Several seconds passed in silence. Alex's stomach churned. Meanwhile, Kennedy turned to the weapons corner, shoulders back and eyes bright. Weps, warm up. Crackle. The speaker to Kennedy's right sputtered to life. Station, calling, buzz. This is Indonesian Navy submarine Cheng Bogo, an accented voice said. Say again your last over. Shit. Kennedy dropped the mic like it was radioactive. Sue had the guts to pick up the microphone and reply, Cheng Bogo, this is U.S. Navy submarine 810. We just wanted to confirm your identity, over. This is Cheng Bogo. Roger, out. The transmission ended with a click. Signing off like that was rude, but no local Navy would call an American submarine out, even when they were being assholes. Look at us making friends with the locals, Alex muttered, feeling cold. Casey snorted. It's a fine Navy tradition, sir. Find me that Nake 4, Kennedy snapped at Sue. Her face was red with embarrassment, but the captain either didn't care or didn't notice. OOD, aye. Kennedy stormed out with Dubois on his heels. Alex wandered over to where Senior Chief Sally and Sue huddled together over the sonar consoles. You told him that it was a military Nake 3, Sue hissed. Why the fuck won't he— Morning, Nav, Alex interrupted. Sue turned, her posture still rigid. Morning, sir, she hesitated. Did you— I saw and heard, Alex said. But this isn't the time or place to bitch about it. He couldn't very well add that he knew the captain was over-eager and aggressive. Kennedy was the captain, and his officers and chiefs knew better than to criticize him in public. Yes, sir, sorry. Sue flushed again. Alex smiled crookedly. No need to apologize. Let's just find the terrorists and let the rest take care of itself, all right? I can do that, sir, she sighed. We're just a little on edge. I know. It's okay. We all fuck up sometimes. Remember mine with the tug? Yeah, she finally smiled. I thought Commander Rothberg was going to rip your head off for that. Me too. Patting her on the shoulder, Alex gestured for Master Chief Casey to follow and headed out of the space in Kennedy's wake. You going to mention to the captain that he should have pinned 05 on you yesterday? Casey asked after they were out of control. Alex's heart skipped. He's been a bit busy. Busy almost shooting other Navy submarines. Damn, what would have happened if Cheng Bogo hadn't answered? And why didn't Kennedy seem worried about that? Yeah, but making full-on commander is a big fucking deal. I know admin put it on his calendar. Casey frowned. I made sure of it. I think we're all distracted by these terrorists, Master Chief. Alex wished Casey would stop. Sure, getting promoted was nice, but the ceremony was just a formality. The promotion already went through. He'd get paid, regardless. Casey shot him a look. You sound pretty fucking unexcited for someone about to put on full commander. I'm not big on attention, Alex shrugged, and he still felt like vomiting. Sir, I figured that out 20 minutes after you reported on board, Casey grinned. Still doesn't mean you shouldn't get recognized, or that the captain should have forgotten. We've got bigger fish to fry. Alex hoped his tone would end that conversation, but Casey rolled his eyes. Speaking of which, let's go talk to the boss about the current mess. You ain't getting out of it that easy, but I'll shut up for now, Casey replied, squeezing past a pair of sailors working on a T-valve. Alex forced a smile but said nothing. The walk to Kennedy's stateroom was short, and they went the rest of the way in silence. Unlike previous classes of American submarines, the attack center was on the same deck as the officers' staterooms. As always, Kennedy's door was closed. He knocked. "Enter!" Kennedy shouted. Alex walked in, Master Chief Casey on his heels. Casey closed the door, muttering something, and Alex knew why. Kennedy sat with Dubois at the table. Again? Alex didn't think there was anything untold happening between the pair. Kennedy was too ambitious to be that stupid. But it was still weird. Both looked up. "You have a minute, sir?" Alex asked. "I got an email back from 7th Fleet Intel. A British plane tracked a Nake 4 doing a personnel transfer with a ferry near Alderman's outpost. They think it might be our guy." "Oh?" Kennedy perked up. "Where's Alderman's again?" "West of the Maldives," Alex replied. "So much for doubt concerning why the Nake would be so far north," Kennedy smirked. Alex tried not to grimace. "Sir, the aircraft observed a PAX transfer, no luggage. The manifest the ferry submitted indicated all the passengers were Indian. 14 people, and no explosives." Kennedy waved a hand. "They might have unloaded the explosives earlier." "Or not at all," Alex said. "They did pull into Alderman's, and there's no way Alderman's bomb sniffers would have missed explosives." "No, c'est impossible." Dubois shook her head. "This may be a second Nake, sent as a decoy, or they disguised the explosives." "Ma'am, if they can do that, why the hell use a submarine?" Alex rolled his eyes. "Anyone with technology to mask explosives can ship them straight into Armistice Station in a cardboard box." "XO's got a point, sir," Casey said. Kennedy scowled. Dubois glared. "I'm not convinced our target has no explosives, XO." Kennedy shook his head. "The idea of anyone blowing up Armistice Station is horrific. But there are some sick bastards in the world. We'll proceed as intelligence dictates." "French intelligence?" Alex couldn't say. Not with Dubois there. He needed to get Kennedy alone, but Dubois stuck to him like a limpet. What the hell was her game, anyway? Hours ticked by. Kansas investigated and queried 7 more contacts, none a Nake 4. Worse, another one of their UVs sank, shorting out when halfway through its battery power. It was an unpredictable mechanical short, perfectly explainable and unlikely to get anyone fired. But who wanted to explain to taxpayers why $6 million of their money now lived on the bottom of the Indian Ocean? Kennedy sure didn't, judging from the way he yelled at Alex for delivering the good news. With 7 hours left before the SAG, or Surface Action Group, arrived, Kennedy was on edge. He prowled in and out of control, distracting watchstanders and spinning Sue up every time she twitched the wrong direction. Kennedy's new favorite sport was tormenting the navigator. "Mind if I steal you for a sec, sir?" Alex asked from the entrance to control. As far as anyone could tell, Dubois was asleep. Alex wished Kennedy would do the same, but the captain was too keyed up. "You find out anything useful, XO?" "I got another intel report from 7th Fleet." "Come on." Was that a scowl? He was all about French intel, but American intelligence reports made him frown. Alex couldn't figure the guy out. A moment later, they reached Kennedy's stateroom and shut the door. Part of Alex wanted to check the closet for Dubois. She'd been anchored to Kennedy's side since getting underway, but that would be impolite. 7th Fleet Intel still isn't sure about explosives, or the CLO's intent. Alex handed over a hard copy of the email. Kennedy read it and rolled his eyes. "Deadly force is still authorized if they won't communicate their intentions." if, Alex stressed, that says we need to talk to these guys. We'll see. Alex took a deep breath. Sir, I'm not sure what the French angle is here. Huh? Kennedy looked up from the message. Commander Dubois seems stuck on shooting these guys. Butterflies danced in Alex's stomach. Her enthusiasm worries me. That's my concern. Kennedy speared him with a glare. Commander Dubois is a naval officer doing her duty, nothing more. From where I'm sitting, it seems like she's trying to get us to do her dirty work, Alex replied. That's enough, XO. You're not privy to the conversations she and I have had concerning this situation. She has my full confidence. Alex checked a sigh. Yes, sir. That'll be all. Kennedy's tone left no room for argument, so Alex left the stateroom, heading back to control. He might not be able to stop this clusterfuck, but at least he could mitigate the damage. 5. Career suicide. 2 hours of paperwork later, sonar detected the Nake 4. As fate would have it, Sue was on watch again, finally calm without the captain poking at her every 5 minutes. Kennedy made a show of getting proper rest and pranced off to his rack an hour earlier, decreasing the tension level and control by a factor of at least 4. Alex, doomed to wakefulness while the captain napped, camped out in a corner with a stack of enlisted performance evaluations and let everyone ignore him, lest another false alarm spin things up. He told Sue to delay waking the captain until they had a positive identification, buying Kansas another 20 minutes of blessed calm. OOD, tonals and blade rate match a Nake 4, the sonar watch reported. Range 30,000 yards, bearing 004 and moving from right to left. Very well. Sue twisted to look at Alex. I'll call the captain, he said. No reason to give Kennedy a reason to pick on Sue again. You close the Nake. She smiled faintly. Aye, sir. Alex grabbed the phone, waiting 6 rings for Kennedy to pick up. Captain, the groggy voice said. Sir, it's the XO. We found the Nake 4. Don't do anything until I get there. Click. Alex hung up the phone, a heavy feeling curling in his stomach. Everyone was too quiet. Side conversations about sports and trivia ceased. French and American intelligence contradicted one another, but no one said not to shoot. Armistice Station was too rich, too big. No government wanted to risk 20,000 lives. The problem with that math was that the Nake had people on board too. When did they become unimportant? Alex tried to swallow the dryness in his throat. It didn't work. What do we have? Kennedy asked before he even had a foot through the hatch. He slammed it shut behind himself, the sound ringing in the too quiet space. Alex's eyes widened. He never heard Sue's report. Kennedy walked in carrying the firing key. Firing keys, officially a fire interdict switch, or FIZ, were a new addition to American submarines. Combat systems became more integrated and automated in the last decade, leading to the installation of a master firing key. A submarine might keep the local firing keys in the torpedo room, but even with those inserted, Kansas couldn't shoot a torpedo or missile without the master key. This was peacetime. The key lived in Kennedy's stateroom safe, the combination to which only Kennedy and Alex knew. Kennedy strode over to the weapons corner and inserted the firing key, turning it until it clicked. Firing key is green. He turned it until the key clicked. Set battle stations, torpedo. Shit, this was real. 5 minutes later, with every watertight hatch shut, Kansas's crew was ready for combat. No American submarine had fired a torpedo in anger since World War II. Would they be the first? Nerves left Alex lightheaded. This was Kansas's chance. But what if they were wrong? Kennedy didn't seem concerned. The captain stood in the center of control like some conquering hero, hands on his hips and back straight. Alex shoved his hands in his pockets and walked over to the sonar corner. "What's the Nake doing?" he asked. "Stumbling around like a one-legged donkey in the dark?" Senior Chief Sally shook her head. "I can almost hear these cats without the amplifiers, sir." Weird. Alex chewed his lip. "I think—" "Firing point procedures, tubes 1 and 2, Kennedy ordered. Nodding to Senior Chief Sally, Alex crossed to the weapons corner. As XO, verifying every firing solution was his job. Alex didn't have to agree with Kennedy to do his job. Besides, generating firing solutions early was excellent practice. Kansas's weapons team was top-notch, and their solution was ready in just a few minutes. Alex went over the numbers twice before nodding at the weapons officer, Lieutenant Lee King. "Solution set," Lee reported. "Solution checked," Alex said. Kennedy grinned. "Very well." Dubois, standing behind Kennedy, smiled. Was that victory in her eyes? Not yet. Alex glanced down at the plot. The range was down to 24,000 yards, now that Kansas turned on an intercept course. The Mark 48 Seabass torpedo had a maximum effective range of 21 nautical miles at 55 knots. Kansas carried 16 war shots and 10 dummy torpedoes used for exercises. Standard practice was to shoot torpedoes in pairs. They were well within range, but shooting from further out made for inaccuracy. How long would Kennedy wait? And why jump straight to torpedoes? Alex walked over to stand next to his boss, trying to ignore Dubois' glare. "You want to try contacting them, sir?" "They won't answer, but go ahead," Kennedy shrugged. "Aye, sir." Great. Kennedy wanted to put the guy with a fear of public speaking on the underwater telephone. No way was that an accident. Taking a deep breath, Alex lifted the Gertrude handset. He swallowed a few times before words came, but he couldn't chicken out now. Not with Kansas closing the Nake 4 at a mile every 2 minutes. Intercept in 24 minutes. But we're not trying to ram her. When will he shoot? Everything Alex read on Nakes said their underwater communication suite left a lot to be desired. Clearing his throat, Alex depressed the talk button. "Unidentified Nake 4 submarine northwest of Armistice Station. This is U.S. Navy submarine, over." "Terrorists ain't gonna say jack," someone muttered. Alex twisted to give FT-1 Robertson a stern look, and Robertson's eyes snapped back to her console. The silence was ominous, however. "Unidentified Nake 4 submarine northwest of Armistice Station. This is U.S. Navy submarine, over," Alex repeated. It would be so much easier if he could just use Kansas's name, but security precautions said no. Still, nothing. "Range?" Kennedy demanded. 20,000 and closing, sir," Sally replied. "Make tubes 1 and 2 ready in all respects, including opening the outer doors," Kennedy said. "All stop, initiate hover." "All stop I, initiate hover I," Master Chief Casey replied. He glanced Alex's way as Kansas glided to a standstill, and Alex could see worry in the Cobb's brown eyes. Control suddenly felt ice cold. Another attempt to communicate with the Nake 4 only produced static. Taking a deep breath, Alex turned to Kennedy. "Captain, I recommend we close range to 10,000 yards. He might not be able to hear us." Gertrude use was notoriously spotty among civilian submariners. Hell, half their underwater radios didn't even work. There was no way to know if the Nake was even listening. "If you think I'm getting any closer to an underwater bomb, you're crazy." Kennedy's grin softened the reply, and a few people laughed. But Alex knew a rebuke when he heard one. Sir, we don't know that he's a bomb, he said. Intelligence reports contradict— Not now, XO! Alex's mouth snapped shut. Pressing would only piss Kennedy off. Kennedy was the type of CO who always had to be right. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Alex scowled. Even Farragut would hate this idiot. He shouldn't call his CO that, not even in the privacy of his own mind. Alex couldn't make himself care. He twisted to look at the tracking party. What's our range to Armistice Station? 18,000 yards, sir, Robertson replied. Thank you, Alex nodded. 18,000 yards was 9 nautical miles. The French thought the Nague was packed with TATP or PETN, neither of which had an underwater blast radius of half that. The Nague needed to ram the station to do real damage. There were a dozen ways to stop that from happening, including placing Kansas right in the Nague's path. Yeah, suicide wasn't Alex's go-to choice, but neither was murdering civilians by accident. Kennedy already proved himself willing to shoot the wrong submarine just 10 hours earlier. What if he was wrong again? The U.S. had enough enemies in this part of the world. How bad would it get if they shot up a boat full of Indians? Things between India and the U.S. were already a mess. The Indians had threatened to eject the U.S. ambassador after detecting USS Jimmy Carter leaving their waters 4 months earlier. The Navy claimed it was a navigation error, but everyone with internet access knew Jimmy Carter was a spy submarine. We should not wait, Dubois said from Kennedy's left. Max underwater range for the amount of TATP or PETN they could carry is about 5,000 yards, Alex snapped. That means we still have time. Is there a reason you don't want us to make sure these are homicidal terrorists before shooting, Commander? I do not like your tone, Dubois sneered. And I don't like your willingness to murder civilians. Alex crossed his arms. Looks like we're even. Casey gasped. Several mouths dropped open. Alex was beyond caring. Kennedy wasn't stupid, but Dubois spent the last few days egging on his dreams of glory. Kennedy wanted to be noticed. Killing terrorists was the quickest way to the top when war wasn't going to happen. That's enough, XO. Kennedy lunged between them. Your objections have been noted. Can you do your job, or do I need to relieve you? That stung. Alex almost dared Kennedy to relieve him, until inspiration struck. I can do one better. He took a deep breath. I can do my job, sir, Alex replied, feeling strangely calm, though I could use a minute if you don't mind. Kennedy smiled, all teeth. Go ahead. Thanks. Alex looked his CO right in the eye, but the glee in Kennedy's gaze no longer made him feel sick, just angry. Turning, he headed towards the hatch, not looking at anyone. French intelligence is certain there are no civilians on board, Dubois said. If they refuse to answer your hails, Captain, they cannot mean well. Time to say goodbye to my career. No one noticed how his path out of the space took him right by the panel containing the firing key. A quick flick of fingers turned the key to the off position, and Alex slipped it into his pocket. He didn't stick around to listen to Kennedy's reply. Alex just closed the hatch and headed down the ladder to his stateroom, ducking into the head to splash water on his face. Kennedy would notice what he'd done before long, so he needed to hide the firing key, preferably somewhere he could reach it in a hurry in case he was wrong. Shit. What if he was? This gamble didn't just put his career on the line, it risked thousands of lives. Quick math told Alex that he couldn't do something like lock the firing key in his own stateroom safe. That was too far from control. Giving it to someone else to hold was out of the question, too. No way was he forcing someone to choose between loyalty to the XO and the CO. Uneasy instinct told Alex he'd win a popularity contest, but he refused to draw someone else into his little mutiny. Fuck that noise. It's only mutiny if I'm wrong. Alex's stomach rolled. Why the hell wouldn't Kennedy listen? Instead, Dubois ran him in merry little circles, leading him to ignore every bit of intelligence provided by his own government. This was insane. Alex glanced at himself in the mirror and wished he hadn't. His blue eyes were bloodshot, and anyone who knew him could tell something was wrong. But it wasn't like anyone would assume the stupid firing key grew legs and walked out on its own. They'd know it was him. Even if Alex was right, there'd be hell to pay. He was okay with that, if it meant saving lives. Squaring his shoulders, Alex ducked back into his stateroom, grabbing a piece of duct tape. Balling up the key and its chain, Alex stuck it to the piece of tape and walked back out of his stateroom. Forward 40 feet, he paused outside the hatch leading to control. Quickly, Alex stuck the tape to the smooth underside of a power panel. No one would look there, but he could grab it if everything went straight to hell. Opening the hatch to control, he almost collided with Master Chief Casey. Worry lined Casey's face, his brows pulled down over his eyes like angry hoods. "Starting to worry about you, sir," Casey whispered. "I just needed a minute." Alex contemplated bringing Casey into his little one-man conspiracy, but he didn't want to sink the cob, too. "What's changed?" Captain made a half-hearted attempt to hail him again, but nothing answered except shrimp fucking. Casey growled under his breath. "Poor fuckers are still coming in at 6 knots. My dead grandma would drive a submarine faster." "XO, I'm glad you're back." Kennedy turned to Alex, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Now, if you wouldn't mind taking your station with the firing party, we can get on with this." Yeah, that too-polite tone was the sound of Kennedy composing Alex's end-of-tour fitness report in his head. Alex pretended not to notice while Dubois gloated. "Yes, sir." Not that they'd fire a damned thing without the key in. Alex headed over to stand next to Kansas's weapons officer, watching Kennedy out of the corner of his eye. The bastard was excited. Eager, like trying not to bounce on the balls of his feet while his eyes took in every person in the space. Kennedy ignored Alex, however. Was his conscience acting up? Maybe Alex could work on that. Dubois was a mysterious piece of work with goals he couldn't understand. But Kennedy was a fundamentally decent person. Shit. Master Chief Casey noticed the lack of firing key. His station was closest to the panel, and Casey's head snapped around to look at Alex, his eyes wide. Casey was a Kansas old-timer. He'd been on board a year longer than Alex, and in the Navy for 26 years. He was smart, good at his job, and more loyal to the Navy than any single officer. Like all chiefs of the boat, he was a consummate professional who viewed saving officers from themselves as his duty. Alex held his breath, waiting for Casey to draw Kennedy's attention to the missing key. Slowly, Casey nodded. Then he turned back to watching the helmsman. Relief almost swept Alex's legs out from under him. He leaned on the nearest bulkhead, chest tight. Damn. Every minute ticking by brought the Nake 4 another 200 yards closer to Kansas. Every minute was a chance they might hear a hail. "Range?" Kennedy demanded, reading Alex's mind. 16,000 yards, sir," Sally replied. "Very well." Kennedy's lips pressed into a thin smile. Alex knew he was fighting a grin. "Should we try talking to them again, sir?" Alex asked. "The last thing we need is an international incident caused by bad intel." There, if he could paint Kennedy as the victim of mistaken intelligence instead of... "I have already told you that our sources are certain," Dubois rolled her eyes. "I understand that you have not seen the raw data, Commander Coleman, but I have shown them to your captain, and he agrees." Son of a bitch. Dubois backed Kennedy into a corner. She's too clever by half. Alex knew when he was outclassed. He just wished he knew why. What the hell was Dubois' goal? Why would she want them to shoot a submarine full of Indian civilians? France and India were in bed together, had been for years. They even shared military technology. Hell, India bought French torpedoes and diesel submarines in droves. "I think if this cat wanted to talk, he would have done it already," Kennedy replied after an ominous silence. "Verify your solutions are up to date, Webs." "Firing solutions set and ready, Captain." Kansas was not alone tracking the Nake. Unbeknownst to the American submarine, a second nuclear attack submarine hovered directly beneath her, silent and armed. This submarine also had 2 Mark 48 Seabass torpedoes loaded in tubes 1 and 2. Her other 4 torpedo tubes, however, contained F-21 Artemis torpedoes, manufactured at the Naval Group headquarters in Paris, France. France did not use Seabass torpedoes, but Lockheed Martin gifted a quartet of them to the French Navy years earlier, hoping France's growing submarine fleet needed more torpedoes than Naval Group could provide. However, Lockheed Martin underestimated French pride. Yes, their Navy tested and shot 2 of the 4 torpedoes. No, they would not buy more of them. They then listed the other 2 as disassembled and discarded, saving them for a very special moment. Captain Jules Rochambeau was one of the few aware that moment had arrived. Tensions in the Indian Ocean were high. French and Indian interests head-butted with Australia at every turn. America, typically, bumbled into the middle of that mess without understanding or caring for local politics. They sided with Australia without considering India's logical hegemony over the region or legitimate French interests. Most people forgot that France never relinquished her Indian Ocean colonies. French nationals lived in those waters, unlike Americans. Thus, Rochambeau's Barracuda deployed on special orders from Admiral Bernard. Rochambeau knew only the broad strokes of his country's plans. No mere submariner was well placed enough to know them all, but he knew that France needed resources. Competition among European nations bordering the Mediterranean Sea was fierce, and no one wanted oil wells peppering their own coasts. The Indian Ocean, however, was vast and full of oil, precious metals, and more. France needed those resources. India was willing to share, particularly in return for French-built submarines and weapons. Barracuda was an advanced Requin-class submarine, commissioned just a year ago in 2036. She was, in her captain's unbiased opinion, the quietest submarine in the world. He'd certainly maneuvered her underneath the Americans without Kansas noticing. So much for the vaunted American submariner's skill. They still thought they were the best in the world, were still blissfully unaware that other nations equaled and then surpassed their technology. Now was not the time to disabuse them of that notion, however. Now was time to watch and listen, to wait and see if Kansas would sink the Nake 4. Rochambeau bared his teeth in a hungry smile. If Camille did her duty and Kansas fired, Barracuda would vanish as if she had never been present. If Kansas did not fire, Rochambeau's smile grew. 6. False flag. Kennedy put his hands on his hips like some storybook hero. Was he posing for the VDR? Someone should remind this overexcited windbag that photo opportunities came after the messy stuff. "Tubes 1 and 2, fire," Kennedy ordered. Lee slapped the firing buttons for both tubes. Everyone held their breaths. Kansas was about to become the first American sub to fire torpedoes at a civilian target in over 80 years. Alex shoved his hands in his pockets. Nothing happened. "Captain, I think we have some sort of malfunction here," Lee said. "What?" Kennedy whirled, eyes wide. His hands flew off his hips, flapping uselessly. The right one caught on the periscope display camera, and Kennedy's jaw dropped. So much for posterity. Alex felt a little sick, despite his thoughts. He'd just disobeyed an order, or close enough, even if no one ordered him not to steal the firing key. In a world where orders must be obeyed. Sure, the Geneva Convention said that following orders was no excuse, but Kennedy's orders hadn't been illegal or immoral. Just wrong. How the hell could doing the right thing feel so wrong? "The firing key is fucking gone," FT1 Robertson said. Everyone turned to face her. Everyone except Alex, whose eyes remained on Kennedy. "What?" Kennedy yelped, color draining from his face. "It's not there, Captain," Robertson repeated. "I can fucking see that!" Kennedy surged forward, looking at the deck under where the key should be. Several people joined his search. Sue took 2 steps forward and stopped, seeming lost as her watch team fell apart, looking under consoles, behind monitors, and under people's feet. Alex felt like an island of calm amidst the insanity. It wasn't quite chaos, but no one paid attention to their duties. He hadn't expected the missing key to be so distracting. Even the sonar team started crawling under their consoles, headsets off. "Senior," Alex caught Senior Chief Sally by the arm. "You're our eyes and ears. Let others look." She blushed. "Sorry, sir." Alex just gestured her back to her console, and then noticed Master Chief Casey's eyes on him. After a moment, Casey wandered over to his side. "You're fucking crazy, sir," Casey whispered. Alex's stomach did a backflip. "Tell me about it." Casey just grimaced. "I think this might..." The Gertrude speaker to Alex's right crackled. "U.S. Navy submarine, this is... crackle. Make 4 submar... Can you... over?" Spinning, Alex grabbed the handset so quickly he almost tripped over his own feet. "This is U.S. Navy submarine. Say again, over." More static greeted him. "Give me that!" Kennedy yanked the handset out of Alex's hands. "Unidentified submarine, this is U.S. Navy submarine. Identify yourself immediately, over." "Nick?" A chirp and then more crackling. "Pass, over." "What is this bullshit?" Kennedy glanced wildly around the space. "And where the hell is my firing key?" Fuck. Alex tried not to look guilty, but this mystery didn't need Sherlock Holmes. He was the only one who left the space since Kansas manned battle stations, and Kennedy was no idiot. Self-centered and aggressive, yeah. Not stupid. Kennedy zeroed in on Alex, his eyes bulging. "You did this!" "We should focus on getting comms with the Nake, Captain," Alex replied, ignoring the way his heart thundered into his throat. "It sounds like they have passengers on..." Hands hit his chest. Alex stumbled back into a weapons panel, barely catching himself before falling. Eyes wide, he stared at Kennedy, unable to believe that his CO had laid hands on him. Physical violence wasn't... Fuck comms! Kennedy lunged forward until they were almost nose to nose. "Give me the goddamned firing key!" Throat tight, Alex straightened and looked his captain in the eye. "We need to establish their intentions before shooting." "Fuck their intentions! I just gave you an order!" Yep, there went his career. But doing the right thing was worth more than that, right? Alex opened his mouth, only for Sally to cut him off. "Launch transients! 2 torpedoes in the water, close aboard," the sonar chief said. "Son of a bitch, they're close! Too close for a bearing." Shit. Shoving past Kennedy, Alex bolted for the hatch. Flinging it open, he grabbed the firing key from where it was taped under the power panel. Alex tore the tape off and let it flutter to the floor, lunging back into control. "Weps!" He tossed the key, Lee caught it, inserting the key in one smooth motion. Key is green. You son of a bitch. Kennedy crossed the space to lean into Alex's face again. I'll finish you for this. Your career is over. No shit, Sherlock. Alex twisted away from his CO, looking over to sonar. Senior, tell me who the hell fired. I can't hear anyone, sir. Sally shook her head. But the torpedoes came from close. How close? Alex asked. Like right the fuck on top of us, Sally grimaced. They're outbound, though. Otherwise, we'd be dead. Did we fire? Kennedy demanded as Alex dodged around him. Weps, contact the torpedo room. Sir, the tubes aren't in local control. Lee's face was stark white. We physically can't have fired, Captain. Alex reached sonar and looked at the array of monitors. The traces on screen showed only one contact, and that correlated to the Nake 4. Oh, fuck, he whispered. What now? Kennedy looked like he wanted to murder Alex. Those torps are inbound the Nake 4. Alex felt cold. Almost on cue, the Gertrude speaker crackled. U.S. Navy submarine, fire on us? Buzz. Would you? We have passengers and our... The transmission vanished in a sea of static. Alex grabbed the handset without thinking. Nake 4, this is U.S. Navy submarine. We have not, I say again, have not fired on you. He glanced at the plot and did some quick math. Those torpedoes were closing on the Nake 4 awfully fast. Recommend you turn to course 270 and come up to your top speed. Surface as quickly as you can, over. It won't help. FT1 Robertson met his eyes. But now Robertson looked horrified instead of cocky. They've still got to try. Wild ideas raced through Alex's mind. Could Kansas race forward and drop noisemakers? Could she somehow distract the torpedoes away from the civilians? What's the torpedo's speed? He asked. Sally turned to look at him, her eyes wide. 55 knots, she whispered. All tonals match a Mark 48. Alex's jaw dropped. Kennedy lurched forward. That's not possible. I can only tell you what I hear, sir. Sally looked back at her screens. Computer concurs. Impact in 2 minutes. The Nake was running, for all the good it would do them. Running at 35 knots might buy them a little time, but no civilian submarine ever made could survive the explosive force of 2 warheads like the Mark 48 carried. 650 pounds of high explosive, times 2, would kill a nuclear submarine made of military-grade steel. The Nake would crack open like an egg. Alex wanted to vomit. Time seemed to slow. Kansas's control room went eerily quiet. The drama of the lost firing key forgotten. Even Kennedy was silent, watching the display with wide eyes. Eventually, Sally and her sonar team removed their headsets. This close, Kansas's sailors could hear the explosion through the hull. Using amplifiers might rupture eardrums. Alex took refuge in minutia. Contemplating the fate of the civilians on board the Nake burned too much. His stomach rolled. A Nake wasn't a warship. Wasn't made of high-end steel or compartmentalized. She had the bare minimum of compartments to meet international safety standards for a civilian submarine. Sailors on a sunken warship might escape. These civilians had no chance. They were all going to die. Were they terrorists? Did it matter? The torpedoes reached the wildly maneuvering Nake. The shockwave hit Kansas seconds later. They weren't close enough for it to hurt, but the sub still trembled as the boom 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 rolled through the hull. No one spoke. Minutes ticked by. Alex swallowed, licked his lips. We should check for survivors. Kennedy snorted. There won't be any. We still should, Alex replied. The international law of the sea says, the U.S. never signed that treaty, Kennedy snapped. But fine, we'll humor your goddamned bleeding heart and go look for dead terrorists. Except a boat with a bomb, like the supposed terrorists had, would have made a much bigger explosion. Alex kept his mouth shut and went to work. An hour later, Kansas's newly deployed UV approached the wreckage, while civilian ships and submarines from 10 different nations closed to help. News helicopters buzzed over the surface, leaving Alex glad they could hide under the waves. At least no one could actually see them down here. Kansas moved within 5,000 yards of the downed Nake and sent the UV ahead, swimming it out while the attack sub initiated a hover. 3 civilian subs were closer, but most of the locals kept their distance, waiting for news of survivors. No submariner in their right mind thought there would be. Not when 2 torpedoes slammed into a civilian submarine. Kennedy holed up in his stateroom again while Alex watched the UV's camera view over Sally's shoulder, heart heavy. However, Commander Dubois remained in control, her sharp eyes watching everyone. Something about her quiet demeanor gave Alex the willies. Was she happy? He burned to kick her out of control. But Kennedy still thought she was on their side. We went after the sub she sent us after, and then some mystery submarine shot it, with American-built torpedoes. The heavy feeling in Alex's gut wouldn't go away. Something was very wrong here. Sonar never picked up secondary explosions, sir, Sue whispered, her eyes also flicking to Dubois. I know, Alex swallowed. Neither mentioned how that decreased the odds that the Nake was full of explosives. Any explosives would have disintegrated the Nake when a Mark 48 hit. Yet as the UV swam forward, there was enough of the civilian sub left to recognize. Sue's shoulders hunched. Feels like we got the wrong boat, XO. You didn't shoot it, Sue. None of us did. Alex glanced around, saw the guilt etched in every face. Those weren't our torpedoes, folks. Place the blame where it belongs, not on yourselves. Crackle. A voice warbled out from the Gertrude. American submarine, how dare you pretend you didn't kill those people? You... Turn that shit off, Alex ordered. Grimacing, Sue turned the volume down until Sea Adventurer finished ranting. That made 4 civilian submarines screaming obscenities at Kansas, and counting. The station hadn't weighed in yet, but it was only a matter of time. Alex returned his attention to the monitor as the UV got in close. The Nake was in 4 main pieces of twisted, warped, and shattered metal. Its command compartment was relatively intact, if one discounted the way the rear bulkhead was ripped off and lay 40 feet away from the front end. Squinting, Alex could make out the foggy outline of seats, one of which still had a body strapped to it. To his left, someone retched. Who the fuck did this? Sue kicked an angle iron. There's no one else here that has Mark 48s. I hear you. Alex's mind raced through that paradox. Only a handful of countries used the Mark 48 torpedo. Last he checked, none of the submarines around Armistice Station were Brazilian, Australian, Canadian, Dutch, or Taiwanese. Hell, all those nations were American allies. They wouldn't sneak up and kill a civilian submarine without communicating first. Would they? The world was changing, and Alex couldn't keep up. We need to call this in, he muttered. Sue grimaced. The captain said to keep comms secure until after we determined what happened. Not much of a fucking question about that. Alex gestured at the monitor. Chief Sally moved the UV away from the busted command compartment, moving it towards what looked like the small submarine's cargo area. If there were explosives, they would be... The Gertrude crackled, fuzz filling control. Probably just another civilian calling to yell at us, Sue sighed. U.S. Navy submarine, this is French Navy submarine Barracuda, over, an accented voice said. Alex's head snapped up just in time to watch an unsurprised expression of satisfaction cross Camille Dubois' face. What the... Sue stared back at him with wide eyes. Barracuda's a Requin-class fast attack. Practically brand new, she said. Where the hell did they come from? Senior, you have a position on Barracuda? Alex asked. Senior Chief Sally consulted with her sonar operators before shaking her head. Nada, sir. Wherever they are, they're damned quiet. Keep them talking and I can figure it. Call the captain and let him know we have another French friend in the vicinity, Alex said to Sue, trying not to look at Commander Dubois. No way was this a coincidence. No fucking way. Aye, sir. Sue looked unhappy, and no wonder. Kennedy would yell at his favorite punching bag, but she followed the order anyway. Meanwhile, Alex reached for the Gertrude handset, only for Barracuda to speak first. U.S. Navy submarine, this is French Navy submarine Barracuda. Answer immediately or be subject to enforcement action, over. What the hell? Alex twisted to look at Dubois. I thought we were allies. Dubois smiled thinly. Destruction of a civilian submarine is not something one tolerates, even from allies. What? Alex's jaw dropped. Kansas hadn't gotten the chance to fire. He made sure of that. Dubois knew it, too. But she only shrugged. I recommend you answer. Her smile was thin, but her eyes bright. Barracuda does not sound willing to wait. Glaring, Alex lifted the phone. Butterflies danced around his windpipe, but he pushed them aside. Jesus, I hope Kennedy hurries his ass up here. He might hate me, but this is way above my pay grade. He took a deep breath. Barracuda, this is U.S. Navy submarine. Go ahead, over, he said. Interesting that the French sub used their name on an open communications circuit. NATO ships and submarines didn't usually do that. Alex stole another glance at the wreckage, his throat tight. U.S. Navy submarine, recover your unmanned vehicle and stand clear of the wreck. The French voice on the other end dripped with scorn. Stay outside 2 miles or be subject to enforcement measures. Who the fuck does he think he is? Kennedy stormed into control. Someone who just saw a lot of civilians killed. Alex swallowed. How did this look from the French perspective? Never mind Dubois. Barracuda just watched 2 American-made torpedoes come from the direction of an American submarine. The conclusion was easy, if wrong. You're out of line, XO, Kennedy snapped. You and I both know we didn't fire, he sneered. We couldn't, thanks to you, and don't think I've forgotten that. Sir, if you'd rather be the guilty party in this little fiasco, have at. Alex rolled his eyes. Kennedy glared. Give me the handset. Alex managed not to say something cutting. Barely. So he forked over the handset without a word, meeting Master Chief Casey's eyes again. It was nice not to be the only one thinking this situation was going to pot in a hurry. Barracuda, this is U.S. Navy Submarine 810, Kennedy said. I do not recognize your authority. Shit. Good thing Kansas remained at battle stations. Goading another attack sub like that was a good way to get their asses shot off. 810, this is Barracuda. You have fired upon and sank a civilian submarine. My government demands an immediate and impartial investigation, the Frenchman replied. One not including America. Over. We didn't fire at anyone! Kennedy's face went red, and his knuckles white on the handset. He turned his glare on Alex. Gee, aren't you glad we didn't shoot? Alex couldn't say that. Pity. Instead, he turned to Dubois. Can you contact them and tell them we didn't shoot? He heard what she said earlier, but he wanted to make her say it again. Dubois obliged with a shrug. I cannot verify that. I was not at your weapons panel. You saw the key wasn't there! Kennedy's features went from bright red to ashen white. You heard every word we said! You may have said one thing and done another. Dubois didn't even blink. It would not be the first time America was so clever. The Gertrude crackled again. 810, this is Barracuda Actual. You have 2 minutes to get clear before I fire upon you, over. Kennedy sputtered, his eyes darting between Dubois and the handset. You... How fucking dare you? I am sorry that I cannot provide assistance, Captain, she replied. Come to 000 and up to 15 knots, Alex ordered Sue as Kennedy continued his stare-off with Dubois. That course was a standard NATO safety course. Assuming Barracuda cared, they'd recognize it and not shoot. You want to leave the UV out, XO? Sally asked. Kennedy threw the handset down. The U.S. Navy doesn't obey other countries' demands. What the fuck do you think you're doing? Do you want to shoot at him, sir? Alex wanted to smack him, because that's our other option. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather not start World War III today. They wouldn't. Contact on Barracuda, bearing 244, range 12,000 yards, Sally cut in. She's opening her outer doors. She's what? Kennedy went white. At least 4 outer doors open, Captain, maybe more, Sally replied. Requins have 6 tubes, Alex said. That leaves 2 in reserve if she wants to smack us with 4 torps, and her torpedo range is better than ours. I know that, XO. Kennedy started pacing again. But Kennedy didn't counter Alex's orders as Sue brought Kansas around and increased speed, the UV trailing in their wake. No, the United States didn't enjoy listening to other countries, but this was the only way to keep this from turning into an underwater shootout. Kansas's VDR would prove she hadn't fired, so would every other automated log. Alex couldn't blame the French for assuming it was them. Not if Barracuda had the same intelligence Dubois presented. Wait a minute. Barracuda should have wanted to shoot based on that intel too. What the hell was going on? They won't shoot, Kennedy said to no one in particular. We can't take that chance, Alex replied. No one else looked at Kennedy, not when he wanted to yell and play the blame game. But it was Alex's job. France is allied with India and Russia. They have ties with China. If we torque this off, we could wind up in a war with all of them. No one's that stupid. Alex rolled his eyes. No one thought that in the days before World War I either. But this web of alliances looks kind of familiar. Even a goddamned engineer could spot the historical parallels. Colonizing the ocean floor brought a lot of nations into conflict with one another. Or it could. So far, everyone had acted like adults. Knowing world history, that wouldn't last long. I wouldn't have taken you for a coward, Alex, Kennedy said. Alex blinked. What? Not firing, running away, disobeying orders. Kennedy's smile turned smug. I suppose conflict brings out the worst in everyone. Alex gaped. He stopped this asshole from firing on civilians. Yeah, he knew Kennedy wouldn't thank him. But did Kennedy have to be such a prick about it? So much for getting his own command. He kissed goodbye to his career, hiding that firing key. 7. False Friend. 2 weeks later, an Indian research ship, fortuitously in the area for an undisclosed scientific expedition, recovered enough of the Nake 4 to confirm the impact of Mark 48 torpedoes. American torpedoes, built and sold by an American corporation. By the time Kansas pulled into Diego Garcia, it was all over the news. Alex locked down email on and off the boat after a few crew members reported getting emails from reporters, and others begged for time to call their families. Dubois, satisfied as a spider in the middle of her web, apologized prettily to Kennedy and promised to help with the investigation. Of course, she understood his position, and while she couldn't verify that they hadn't shot, she could certainly repeat what she saw. Her nice smiles turned Kennedy's ire back on Alex, but he didn't want to deal with the crew's sudden maelstrom of doubt and fear. So he dumped that on Alex and hid in his stateroom. Meanwhile, half the world shouted for American heads on a platter, preferably heads off Kansas, and the other half claimed conspiracy. Kansas spent 3 hours after the incident at periscope depth, explaining the situation to the newly promoted Rear Admiral Hamilton. Hamilton was the acting commodore of Submarine Squadron 8. Captain Grossman, their original squadron CO, was due at court-martial next week for taking bribes from contractors. So Hamilton was in charge, despite a lofty rank which said she should be concerned with bigger things. Unfortunately, they were now a bigger thing, and Kansas was ordered to Diego Garcia at best speed. They arrived late at night with guards posted on the pier to keep reporters out and the crew in. For the first time in his career, Alex's own Navy made it dangerous to leave the boat. Admiral Winifred Hamilton arrived at dawn. Her investigation, complete with 7 aides and 3 legal officers, was a whirlwind of efficiency that left Alex breathless. Kennedy and Alex both wrote statements swearing Kansas never fired a torpedo. Wepps inventoried torpedoes in front of the Admiral to prove they still had every weapon they left Homeport with. Master Chief Casey, Sue Grippo, and everyone else on watch and control wrote nearly identical statements, but the French thorn in their side disappeared without corroborating their case. The U.S. Navy had no right to hold a foreign national, after all, and no one told the guards on the pier not to let a French commander through. 2 hours after Dubois' departure, Admiral Hamilton tried to download Kansas's deck log and VDR, only to find both corrupted beyond repair. 8 hours later, French news sources showed interviews with one Commander Camille Dubois, claiming the hot-headed Americans shot and killed civilians as she smiled that same smile. 2 hours later, the Nake's manifest and passengers, vegetables and civilians to the last atom, were released. The stolen submarines, of which their victim was not one, were recovered by the Indian Navy the next day, sans explosives. The terrorists apprehended would face trial in late 2038, having never come within torpedo range of USS Kansas. A flying boot broke the mirror in Kennedy's stateroom. Long-distance drones overflew Kansas when reporters were barred from the island. Easy to do with the atoll wholly owned by Britain and leased by the U.S. Navy. Navy helicopters threatened to shoot the drones down, and then the Navy got sued when 2 drones plastered themselves into an SH-60R. The Navy's on-the-record statement that Kansas had not fired fell on deaf ears. By the time the torpedo inventory was complete, the story was written and minds made up. Politicians got involved. Reparations were demanded. India threatened to throw American ambassadors out, and U.S. Navy ships and submarines were barred from Armistice Station for 2 months. No one knew who shot the Nake. America's reputation, never the best in that part of the world, plummeted. Even her allies walked a careful line between disbelief and condemnation. A careful no comment was the best the Australians could muster, stuck as they were sharing the Indian Ocean with the most offended country. The Brits looked side-eyed at everyone and ran a scheduled training exercise with the French. The Russians laughed behind their hands and sold India 4 more Akula-class attack submarines. Professional navies didn't kill civilians, and when they did, everyone expected their governments to own up. At least the ongoing discussion over who else might have shot took the spotlight off why Kansas didn't shoot. Stuck in between a furious captain and a confused but restless crew, Alex started to think his career might survive this inferno. He was wrong. Kennedy's ambition to matter during his command tour remained. He couldn't shoot terrorists, but he could get Admiral Hamilton's attention. Otherwise, he might wither and die in obscurity, and heaven forbid that happen. For that, he needed a convenient scapegoat, a way to make himself look better than the rest of the fuck-ups on Kansas. So, he filed charges against Alex the day before Alex transferred. Non-compliance with procedural rules, conduct unbecoming an officer and gentleman, failure to obey order or regulation, misbehavior before the enemy. Hamilton threw the last charge out, since the entire point of this disaster was that the NAIC 4 was never anyone's enemy. But she convened Admiral's mast for the rest of the next day, after a quick consultation with one of the many legal officers still at her disposal. Alex barely got 2 hours' notice, learning just as he left Kansas for the last time. At least his bags were packed and off the boat. He had a room over at the bachelor's officers' quarters until his flight out, and he already turned over his duties to his relief. Somewhere, there was a voice telling him to be grateful for small favors. He ignored it, and headed over to Hamilton's office, located in a small green building buried between shipping containers. His dress blues were packed already. If she didn't like hammering Alex while he wore khakis, that was her problem. Once there, an aide pointed him to a waiting area full of furniture that went out of style with the Cold War. Alex cooled his heels there for a half hour past the time his orders told him to arrive, watching Kennedy and a few others prance into the office proper. Kennedy's smirk could have poisoned toxic gas. "It's horseshit that the captain never did the paperwork for you to put on commander, sir," Master Chief Casey said as he elbowed past Hamilton's yeoman. Alex sighed. "I'll put it on at my next command. I'll still get paid on time." "Still horseshit." Casey shook his head. "What are you doing here, Master Chief?" Alex asked. "Came to testify on your behalf." Casey's face closed off. "Someone ought to." A lump wedged itself in Alex's throat. "Thank you," he swallowed. "But I don't want you getting tarred by this mess." "That's my choice, sir." Sue said the same thing when Alex told her not to come, back on the boat. "And it's my mast," Alex replied. "Brought on by my choices." "You did the right thing, and the captain wants to shit on you for it," Casey snorted. "If not for you, we wouldn't be scrambling to prove we hadn't shot civilians. We'd be dealing with the fact that we had." "I know," Alex whispered. He clung to that knowledge, but guilt weighed him down. Not for having disobeyed orders, but for distracting the crew at a crucial moment. Would they have detected the mystery shooter if the drama between Alex and Kennedy hadn't been so overwhelming? Could they have stopped the other submarine in time? Would they know who shot, and why? Or would Kennedy have just shot the NAIC, sinking his career instead of Alex's? "Then shut your pie hole and let me speak on your behalf, sir. Even admirals listen to Master Chiefs. And even Master Chiefs get screwed." Alex turned to look Casey in the eye. "The fallout will be brutal. The Navy's looking for a punching bag, and I've been elected. There's no reason for you to go down with me." Casey laughed. "I ain't planning on going down, XO. I stopped being your XO when Lieutenant Commander Hunt took over this morning." Alex tried to glare. It was hard. "Oops." Alex took a deep breath. "I'm grateful that you want to help. Really, I am. But you can't. I made my choices, and I'll take my medicine. I knew what I was getting into." A long moment of silence stretched between them. "You sure, sir?" "Positive." Glowering, Casey nodded, clapped Alex on the shoulder, and left. Alex managed not to sigh in relief. Worst case, he could ride out the next few years as a lieutenant commander. Admiral Hamilton couldn't kick him out of the Navy at Admiral's mast, although she could keep him from promoting to commander. That would be a blow. Alex's career had been stellar until this train wreck, and he'd worked his ass off to get where he was. But he could survive it. He had 4.5 years left to go until he could retire at 20. Finally, the yeoman ducked into the office. A few minutes later, she returned, stony-faced. "The Admiral will see you now." "Wave goodbye to your career, asshole," no one said. No one needed to. Alex followed the yeoman in, back straight. Hamilton, Kennedy, and a pair of staff officers waited for him. Hamilton was a tall woman, with brown hair not yet gone to gray, glasses, and a stern expression. Her staffers were both dark-haired and good-looking, alike enough to look like sister and brother. Kennedy wore an ill-concealed smirk. Admiral Hamilton glared at Alex like he reeked of trash. There was no other witnesses from Kansas, but he hadn't expected any. A strange feeling bubbled up as Alex listened to the charges. On 23 November 2037, on board USS Kansas, Lieutenant Commander Alex Coleman removed and hid the firing key. This defiance of procedure resulted in chaos in the attack center during a critical moment. When ordered to hand over the firing key, Lieutenant Commander Coleman refused to do so. His reckless actions hazarded the submarine and could have resulted in the death of 130 American sailors, Hamilton said. Kennedy wrote that. No way was the Admiral that overblown. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Admiral Hamilton asked. He could stay silent and accept what happened, but God only knew how much of the story Kennedy had shared. With their VDR erased, no one would see the way Kennedy had shoved him. Still, words echoed in his mind. "Fuck their intentions, I just gave you an order." Kennedy wanted to shoot a submarine full of innocent refugees trying to escape religious persecution. The international investigation's findings didn't bear much resemblance to the intelligence Kansas received from the French, but it jived all too well with what 7th Fleet provided while they hunted the Nake. "Fuck their intentions, I just gave you an order." Alex swallowed. "Ma'am, I do not deny my actions. I did remove the firing key, and I did not give it back to Commander Kennedy when he demanded it." Saying that Kennedy had shoved him wouldn't help his case, so Alex skipped over it. "However, we were already in communications with the Nake, and they were far enough from Armistice Station that they were not a danger. I felt our duty was to establish their intentions before shooting." "You don't need to say that your actions are the reason Kansas did not shoot." Admiral Hamilton's sigh was sharpened by her glare. "If not for that, the United States would now be defending our destruction of a civilian submarine, instead of proving we did not fire those torpedoes." Kennedy's jaw dropped. Alex felt a surge of vindication. "However, in light of available intelligence, Commander Kennedy's actions were not entirely wrong," she continued. "You, as the executive officer, were responsible for reasoning with your CO or carrying out his orders. You did neither." Alex's heart sank. "Don't be surprised," he braced himself. "I find you guilty of Article 98, non-compliance with procedural rules, and Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation." Hamilton looked him right in the eye. "I find there is insufficient evidence to support Article 133, conduct unbecoming an officer and gentleman. I understand you have been selected for promotion to commander?" Alex swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "I will not remove your selection. However, I will remove you from the list of prospective commanding officers of submarines. You may promote on time, but you will never command a submarine." Alex's heart plummeted. That was better than he expected. But then, why did it burn so much? "Commander Coleman, Your actions may have saved the U.S. Navy a great deal of grief, Hamilton continued. Perhaps there will come a time when we need someone like you in command of a submarine. But your inability to follow orders is a danger to a peacetime Navy. Such conduct as you displayed cannot be rewarded and will not be ignored. I wish you luck in your future endeavors, but they will not be in the submarine force. Dismissed. Heart heavy, Alex saluted, did an about-face, and departed. He should be relieved. He'd finish his career as a commander, which meant a difference in eventual retirement pay of over $600 a month. No one at his next command would know about his shame, but Admiral Hamilton's mercy killed his lifelong dream of commanding a submarine. Alex had wanted nothing else after touring Texas as a kid, back when the boat was a bare-bones hull sitting in an interior dry dock in Groton, Connecticut. His late father worked at Electric Boat as a welder, and he'd brought Alex and his brother out to see a few submarines. Texas had been first. Seeing her drove Alex to earn an NROTC scholarship, to become the first member of his family to graduate college, to have a stellar career where he'd been recommended for his own command. Now, Admiral Hamilton drop-kicked him out of submarines. She could do it, too. Everyone knew Hamilton was on the fast track. Rumors said she'd be the first female chief of naval operations. She was already the first female submariner to wear stars, respected by everyone for her ruthless competence. She had the power to make sure he never walked on board a submarine for anything more than a guided tour. So that was that. His career would survive, but the best parts of it were dead. 8. Interlude. The Kansas Incident. Marquise Lee, Washington Post, December 29th. 1 month after the sinking of a civilian NAIC 4 submarine near Armistice Station, the facts remain murky. The U.S. Navy would have us believe that some unknown rogue element sank that sub, killing all 15 souls on board, using American torpedoes. On the surface, the U.S. Navy has no reason to sink a civilian submarine. The Navy is even known for canning captains under the ever-popular excuse of a loss of confidence. Translation: the Navy is happy to blame the captain. Yet in this case, where blaming Kansas's captain would surely save the Navy face, they have not. They refuse to release the sub's video logs. They refuse to allow outside observers, even those from the United Nations, to interview the crew. What is the Navy hiding? Kansas was sent underway immediately after the Navy's internal investigation, and hasn't been heard from since, buried far from the eyes of the world, as if we'd forget. 36 days after the murder of 15 civilians, it no longer matters. American interests suffer around the world, with the dollar falling and international investors in American-owned underwater stations pulling out. Several underwater habitats, including Agalega Farmstead, near Mauritius, and Rochon Resort, Tromelin, have suffered hostile takeovers in which American investors were ousted by their French, Russian, and Indian counterparts. Tourists with American passports are now barred from Rochon Resort, just like Armistice Station. The Kansas incident continues to spark protests against heavy-handed American diplomacy and lack of accountability worldwide. Thus far, the White House refuses to comment, but with American credibility on the ropes in the Eastern Hemisphere, this is a troublesome trend. 14 February, 2038. There were protesters on the pier. The Seychelles were the creme de la creme of Liberty ports on a Western Pacific deployment. Tropical islands with beautiful beaches and multiple casinos were paradise after being stuck on a nuclear submarine for 64 days straight. Master Chief Chinedu Casey already had a hotel room with a view booked. One right on the water where he could wade out his fucking door into nirvana. Hell, the smell of the island had him all hot and bothered. He was ready to get off this goddamned boat. Kansas wasn't what she used to be. But they'd barely got the lines across before the locals showed up, angry and shouting, out beyond the entry control point. Subs didn't often get to pull into the Seychelles, so at first Casey thought they were just there to stare. No such luck. "You see those signs?" Casey snorted. "Americans go home. Americans aren't wanted. Americans fucking kill civilians." Kansas's new XO, Lieutenant Commander Allison Hunt, grimaced. She was a little woman, competent and sharp-witted. "You don't know they mean us, Cobb." "Ain't no coincidence, ma'am." He glared at a pair of protesters waving a yellow sign, one he hadn't wanted to read. "Kansas killers." "They'll get bored and go home." "And until they do, we can't put down Liberty Call." Casey wanted to throw things. "Gonna go over like a lead balloon. Long underways ain't nothin'. Crew needs a break from the tension." "I know." Hunt tucked a strand of blonde hair behind one ear when it escaped from her bun. "Can't be helped." "They're still fucking there, aren't they?" The new voice made Casey turn to look at Commander Chris Kennedy as his captain came up the ladder from below, scowling. "Ungrateful shits." Hunt gulped. "Captain, we all know that—" "You don't know jack." Kennedy gestured rudely at the crowd. "You weren't here. That piss-pot coward Alex Coleman was in your job, and if not for him, everything would have been fine." Translation? "If not for him, we would have killed the civilians everyone thinks we did," Casey didn't say, resisting the urge to hit something. Maybe he should have said something at Commander Coleman's admiral's mast. He might have pissed off the admiral and been kicked off this miserable shit-can of a submarine. But someone had to take care of his boys and girls, so god damn it, Casey would. "You want me to talk to the chief of the guard, sir? The Seychelles police might be able to chase these guys off." "Fat chance. Half of them probably are the local police, rounded out with some curious finger-fucking tourists." Casey's jaw hurt. "The tourists worry me more. They don't have jobs to go to." "Fuck them. Fuck—" The sharp ringing of a cell phone cut in. Kennedy snarled another curse and then thumbed it on. "Commander Kennedy speaking." 2 seconds into the call, Kennedy's brow furrowed, creating that little line in the middle of his forehead that screamed temper tantrum. Casey'd worked for this CO for 4 months now. Kennedy was smart. Maybe too smart. Problem was, the man didn't want to contain his emotions. A 5-year-old would have pouted less. "Yes, ma'am." Kennedy's voice was flat, but his lips curled into a silent snarl. "I understand." A long silence. "We can be underway within 2 hours, Admiral." Kennedy almost threw the phone in lieu of hanging it up. Casey shifted right in case he needed to dodge. Lieutenant Commander Hunt, less accustomed to riding the boss's emotional roller coaster, asked, "Underway, Captain? We just pulled in." "That was Admiral Hamilton." Kennedy spat, missing the water. The glob hit the hull, oozing slowly downwards as Casey scowled. "Some numbnuts pencil-pushing weenie decided to cancel our port visit because the locals are offended. Cowards." Hunt's jaw dropped. "And they couldn't Kennex things before we went to the trouble of mooring us up here?" Bang! Casey's eyes snapped to the crowd as bright light flashed just on this side of the fence. "Would you look at that? Some enterprising soul figured out bottle rockets. Hell of a way to make us feel welcome." "Go home, Americans! Go home!" Someone in the crowd started it up like a goddamn football chant. "They're good at that," Hunt muttered. Kennedy just glared at the crowd and swore. Kansas got underway 2 hours and 39 minutes after mooring at Port Victoria, Seychelles, running away with her metaphorical tail between her legs. U.S. diplomats tried to spin the exit into respecting their international partners' wishes. Some believed them. Other nations watched and waited. UN Human Rights Council condemns Nake sinking. Aaron Steeple, New York Times. February 19th. The November 2037 Kansas incident sparked 4 separate international investigations, but the latest one has the biggest sting. This morning, upon formal completion of the joint French and Indian investigation, the United Nations Human Rights Council formally condemned the United States for the sinking of a civilian-crewed NAIC 4 submarine in the Indian Ocean, just miles away from underwater powerhouse Armistice Station. This investigation cites the use of American torpedoes to sink the submarine as the deciding factor. No other ships or submarines within 100 miles of Armistice Station were armed with the U.S. Navy's Mark 48 Seabass torpedo. The torpedoes were also fired from the same bearing as USS Kansas, the nuclear fast-attack submarine sent specifically out to find said NAIC. The UN Human Rights Council correctly notes that no other ship or submarine could have fired upon the NAIC from that position. India has demanded reparations be paid to the families of the civilians on board the submarine, 9 of which were Indian nationals. The crew consisted of natives of Sri Lanka, 2, and Malaysia, 4. Both nations have added their votes to such a proposal, which France has taken to the UN Security Council. Needless to say, the United States has vetoed the Security Council from discussing the matter. However, America's influence with the Human Rights Council never recovered from its low point in the 2020s. The Human Rights Council plans to publish a manifesto condemning the cold-blooded and mercenary actions of the crew and commanders of USS Kansas by the end of the week. 22 March 2038. It's a good thing we're here because Jimmy Carter is too old for this shit. Lieutenant Junior Grade Maggie Bennett grinned and brushed wayward black curls away from her face as she checked the depth on the chart. 200 feet under the keel. Not bad. USS Parch, SSN 845, crept along at barely 1 knot, just a smidgen faster than the current near the bottom of the South China Sea. She was invisible, probably the quietest attack submarine ever built by the United States Navy. And there was stiff competition. Even a deaf sonar man's figured that one out. Her department head and Parch's weapons officer, Lieutenant Angela Purnell, leaned casually against Parch's periscope stand. She got spotted back in November. Indians had her all dialed in. Everyone knew what she was. No one knows about us. Maggie felt the familiar thrill roll down her spine. USS Parch was the Navy's newest spy submarine, with dozens of listening systems hidden inside a standard-looking Zero-class hull. Her antennas even appeared the same as those of her sisters, at least at a distance, but they were far more sensitive. A run-of-the-mill Zero-class sub was designed with spying as a primary mission, but Parch had dialed that up several notches. She could tap underwater communications cables, launch and recover drones for audio-visual eavesdropping, and had special thrusters to allow her to hover in shallower water than the larger and obsolete Jimmy Carter could ever dream of. 3 months into her first deployment, Parch already gathered critical data on French-Indian manufacturing agreements, along with some Russian language transmissions they'd yet to translate. Maggie didn't speak Russian, though she was tempted to learn, right after she transferred to intelligence. Maggie's division officer tour on Parch taught her that submarines, as exciting and as interesting as they could be, were not her place. She enjoyed driving a sleek attack submarine, and indulged in infrequent dreams about what commanding one might be like, but what she really burned to do was intelligence work. Unfortunately, today, Maggie was a submariner, and Parch had a dedicated intelligence detachment made up of actual intelligence officers and specialists. Some days she got to watch, others she got to play. Working side by side with them made Maggie realize what she wanted to do with her career. "Head in the clouds again?" Lieutenant Purnell asked, smiling. "Just thinking, ma'am." Maggie kept one eye on the depth gauge while Parch lurked in the middle of the South China Sea. "We started deployment eavesdropping off Mumbai, and now we're watching the biggest Chinese fleet deployment since ever. Makes you feel like a ping-pong ball." "Ours is not to reason why," Purnell shrugged. But if it annoys you so much, feel free to step outside and tell the Taiwanese to stop trying to silently take over underwater stations out here. Parch's current station was a mere 12 nautical miles away from Feng Station, the so-called Jewel of the Formosa Strait. One of the newest, but biggest, underwater habitats in the area, Feng Station was the fourth largest oil producer in the world. Technically, the station was independently owned, but with 47% Chinese investors and 42% Taiwanese, it bore watching. Not that Parch would do anything if the Taiwanese-North Korean coalition tried to snag this station like it did two others. Short of being shot at herself, Parch would merely listen. Technically, they bought out investors in the other two and then kicked the Chinese out as majority owners. Purnell snorted. Tell that to the Chinese. Needless to say, the Chinese objected to what the government of Taiwan, which China still called an illegitimate rebellion, dismissed as legal business shenanigans. China saw nefarious intentions everywhere, and Maggie wasn't sure they were wrong. Decades of living with the threat of Chinese invasion made Taiwan a bit touchy. I think that's their answer. Maggie pointed at the plot, where two Chinese aircraft carriers were surrounded by no fewer than 30 escort ships. 33 at Maggie's last count. They say it's an exercise. Ma'am, if you believe that, I've got an underwater gold mine I'd like to sell you, in the Arctic, Maggie snickered. Hey, you never know what they might find there. You remember when they found oil off the coast of Connecticut? That... Con, sonar, rocket ignition, multiple rocket engine ignitions. The voice of Chief Wong, Parch's senior sonar tech, blared out of the speaker between the two officers. Someone shooting missiles. What? Purnell wheeled around, her dark eyes wide. Maggie's heart hammered into her throat so quickly that she stopped breathing. Chinese breaking radio silence, the intelligence watch reported, scribbling translations frantically. Target is Zhuoying Naval Yard. Make sure you're recording this, Purnell snapped. She turned to Maggie. Wake up the captain. I think she might want to know that we're smack in the middle of what's looking a lot like World War III. Maggie was wrong about war. For the moment.